with Sam Cedar.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Cedar.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, August 4th, 2020. My name is Sam Cedar. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps and steps and steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Professor of History and African American Studies at the University of Houston, the author of 30 books, Professor Gerald Horne, on the dawning of the apocalypse, roots of slavery, white supremacy, settler colonialism, and capitalism in the long 16th century. Also on the program today, states say new stats reporting system accounts for gaps in data. Meanwhile, COVID infections in the Midwest begin to surge, with 40% of households uncounted. Trump will shut down the census count early. It's primary day. Primaries in Kansas could mean a Democratic senator. Primary in Michigan could mean a re-elected Rashida Tlaib. And in Missouri, over 200,000 people could get Medicaid. Meanwhile, polls have Mitch McConnell up in Kentucky, Jones down in Alabama, and Graham and Harrison tied in South Carolina. Department of Homeland Security is trying to designate Antifa a terror organization by tying it into foreign powers. Meanwhile, New York and Michigan are plagued by mail-in ballot snafus as fears grow that Trump's assault on the post office is a twofer. Cyrus Vance Jr., the Manhattan DA, is apparently probing the Trump Inc. for fraud. And lastly, Donald Trump wants a slice of the TikTok sale because he apparently is the one who made it big. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. Let me, I imagine I've said this once or twice before, but probably not as much as it's been warranted because it's been sort of a difficult period around here. But we are still getting emails with condolences for Michael's passing. And I just want to say thank you. We can't respond to all of them, but I want to say thank you to everyone who has sent in emails and really kind notes. Thank you. I wish I had something more to add to that, but thank you. It is much appreciated, and it's pretty moving. So thank you for that. Thank you for joining us today. It is Tuesday. We are now, I guess, 1, 2, 3. What are we? 3 months out now? September, October, November, 3 months out from the election. It does not feel like we are 3 months out from the election. Does not feel like it's August. It is extremely strange time, but there's a lot of things that are happening that we should be paying attention to, not the least of which is what's going on with Department of Homeland Security, building dossiers on reporters. This Department of Homeland Security is not supposed to be doing any of this. They are trying to figure out a way of labeling people who share an ideology about fighting fascists. They are trying to figure out a way of designating them a group and then designating them a terrorist group. And the only way you can do that, it's literally like we're going to try and designate Patriots fans as terrorists. Now, I don't want any editorial about, the irrational patriot hate that people have. But we're going to try and designate the Patriot fans by, as terrorists. So what we need to do is, place some of them in relation to some foreign power. So like, some of these Patriots fans, they went and, they fought in Syria. So they are, they fought with the PKK in Syria. And so they're communists. It's a stretch, but they're doing it. We'll get into that a little bit. And what's going on with the post office, like I said, is just unbelievable. And we will talk more about that. That is really gets my goat. Another story yesterday, I guess it was yesterday. I had hinted that, and maybe I mentioned this on Friday too, that I thought it was quite a coincidence that the number of coronavirus cases being reported flatlined basically on the day that the Trump administration ordered states to not send data to the CDC, but instead to the White House via a private data collection firm. And I don't know, I was just looking at the data. We can put up the graph that we put up from the Wall Street Journal the other day. And you can see it flatlines there, which is a coincidence. Well, it turns out Talking Points Memo has written a piece that says the hospitals in these states were so taken by surprise by this switch that they did not have time to adequately switch the way they formatted their data, the way that they responded to questions. I mean, apparently the way that the data collection works is you get a list of questions, you answer those questions, the data was sent to the CDC. In this new data collection process, the questions were asked differently. I would guess, too, although it's not explicit in this story, that the questions are asked in such a way that also change the nature of the data that comes in, and both qualitatively and quantitatively. However, because there was a new system that was sprung on them at the last minute, apparently South Carolina had a gap in hospitalization data. Idaho public authorities warned that data after 7/15 may not capture all hospitalizations or ICU admissions while facilities transition over to new data submission processes. In Missouri, the state's response rate was decreased. According to the COVID Tracking Project, which collects local data to paint a national picture of the virus, observed on Tuesday that state-level hospitalization data had become erratic in recent weeks. It's clear the technical requirements associated with the new guidelines have caused a major problem, the group reported, adding, these problems mean that our hospitalization data, a crucial metric of the COVID-19 pandemic, is for now unreliable and likely an undercount. We do not think either the state-level hospitalization data or the new federal data is reliable in isolation. We have seen time and time and time again this administration's goal of deconstructing the administrative state, and the way, because their agenda is so narrowly tailored to just making things not work. There is a myriad of ways you can do this by simply changing processes. So that's where we're at in terms of the data.
And here's a visualization of what that looks like in Missouri from the author who wrote.
Yeah, here's the writer of that post. There it is, big gap, and when it returns, it is just sort of basically at where the peak of it where it was, more or less. And it's unclear whether that data is even A, correct at this point, and B, an apples to apples comparison. If you redefine what constitutes a hospitalization for COVID or an ICU visit for COVID, and you do that by asking different questions, you will not get the same answers. We went through that with our podcast stats multiple times. They changed what constituted a download. And so we have, through Libsyn, like two sets of stats. We have like pre 2 years ago and then post 2 years ago, when they changed essentially what they deemed to be a download. So there you have it. But the question of statistics seems to be in the forefront of President Trump's mind. Here is, and this is a good example of like how you can get statistics to say what you want them to say, but you also really need to understand what they say in the first place to get them to say what you want them to say. Or what ends up happening is you look like you are a little bit crazy, as President Trump does in this interview with Jonathan Swan from Axios on their HBO show. Here it is. This is clip number 1.
Take a look at some of these charts.
I'd love to.
We're going to look.
Let's look.
And if you look at death,
started to go up again.
One. Well, right here, the United States is lowest in numerous categories. We're lower than the world.
Lower than the world?
Lower than Europe.
In what?
Look.
In what?
Take a look.
In deaths per.
Here's case death.
Oh, you're doing death as a proportion of cases. I'm talking about death as a proportion of population. That's where the US is really bad.
Well,
much worse than South Korea, Germany, etc.
You can't do that. You have
Why
to go,
can't I do that?
You have to go by where. Look, here is the United States. You have to go by the cases. The cases.
Why not as a proportion of population?
When we have somebody, what it says is when you have somebody that has where there's a case.
Oh, okay.
The people that live from those cases.
It's surely a relevant statistic to say if the US has X
for 1 second.
population.
I want people to understand what's going on here, which is so twisted too, because he's saying that the number of people who die when they contract COVID in the United States is actually lower relative to the world, I guess, or to Europe. And what that means is, A, we have just an enormous amount of cases. And there's a lot of data now suggesting that just because you don't die doesn't mean that this isn't going to impact you for the rest of your life. It also means that we're doing a very bad job of controlling it. And as we have seen, deaths are a lagging indicator. But he also wants to ignore the fact that we have more deaths per population than anywhere else. It's just that we have allowed more of our people to get infected. And somehow, like, that's just, look, Russian roulette is going good.
That's not the part I studied for. I studied for the deaths per cases.
I'm sorry, we can't do that because there's only 4 colors.
Look at, I don't know. We're going to do death by case.
That live from those cases.
It's surely a relevant statistic to say if the US has X population and X percentage of death of that population versus South Korea.
You have to go by the cases.
Well, look at South Korea, for example. 51 million population, 300 deaths. It's like, it's crazy
you don't
compared
know
to
that.
I do. It's on
You
the.
don't know that.
You think they're faking their statistics? South Korea,
I
an
won't
advanced
get into
country.
that because I have a very good relationship with the country. But you don't know that, and they have spikes. Look, here's
Germany low,
here's
9,000.
Here's one right here. United States. You take
Anyway.
the number of cases.
Okay.
Now look, we're last.
Take the number of
meaning
cases.
we're first.
Last, I don't know
We
what
have
we're
the
first
best.
in. As a what?
Take a look
Okay.
again. It's
Go with the
cases.
color palette.
Okay.
And we have cases because of the testing.
1,000 Americans are dying a day, but I understand. On cases, it's different.
No, but you're not reporting it correctly, Jonathan.
I think I am, but
If you take a look at this other chart, look, this is our testing, I believe. This is the testing, yeah.
yeah, we do more tests.
No, wait a minute. Well, don't we get credit for that? And because we do more tests, we have more cases. In other words, we test more. We have. Now take a look. The top one.
Now
That's a
pause
good
it for
thing,
one
not a
second
bad
again.
thing.
Now understand that what he just said undercuts his point, because he wants to go deaths per number of cases, and it's lower relative to our cases than other places. But he's saying that the number of cases we have is inflated because we're testing more. Go ahead.
Now take a look. The top one. That's a good thing, not a bad thing. The top, Jonathan.
If hospital rates were going down and deaths were going down, I'd say terrific. You deserve to be praised for
Well, they
testing,
don't
but they're
even-
all going
you know,
up.
they very rarely talk-
60,000 Americans are in hospital.
If you watch the
1,000
news
dying
or
a
read
day.
the papers, they usually talk about new cases, new cases, new cases.
I'm talking about death.
Well, you look
It's
at
going
death.
up.
Death is way down from where it was.
It's 1,000 a
Death.
day. It was 2,500. It went down to 500. Now it's going up
Death,
again.
excuse me, where it was is much higher than where it is right now.
It went down, then it went up
spiked,
again.
But now it's going down again. It's
going
going
up.
down in Arizona. It's going down in Florida.
Nationally,
it's
it's
going
going
down
up.
in Texas. Take a look at this. These are the tests.
It's going down in Florida?
Yeah, it leveled out and it's going down. That's my report as of yesterday.
Oh my God.
Jesus.
And first off, I don't know when they did that interview, but we're now closer to 1,500 than we are to 1,000 in terms of daily deaths, which just gives you an indication of where the trajectory was. There's only one way to do the statistic, and that's the one that makes it look like we're doing. Look at the four colors.
No, but Jonathan, cases, Jonathan. Come.
Oh my God. If this wasn't about like
We're
just
reading the world.
crap show that we're going through right now, this would be funny.
This is like a good instance of, and obviously the Republicans are enabling this, but any other Republican wouldn't be able to perform this level of insane idiocy.
It's impressive. It's impressive. It's too bad that it's so malignant. We will get to Professor Horne in just a moment. Just a couple of words from our sponsor. As you know, there are books that I love to read. I haven't had a chance to read all 30 of Professor Horne's books, but that's something I'm going to have to wait until my kids get a little bit older. But to read books that I don't think it's terribly important, I get the details from, but I want just the main takeaways. Blinkist. It's an app. It works on your tablet. It works on your phone. It works on your computer. It takes the key insights from over 3,000 nonfiction bestsellers in over 27 categories, condenses them down into blinks, which you can read or listen to in just 15 minutes. So I'm going to read The Dawning of the Apocalypse. But when it comes to how to make friends, and I'm going to just take the key takeaways. Blinkist now offers its members exclusive original podcasts, too, from top authors and creative thinkers. And you can dive deeper into full-length nonfiction audiobooks, Matt, at a special discounted price. Over 14 million people use Blinkist. And they use it to deepen their knowledge about topics ranging from self-improvement to management to how to be happy, how to make friends, how to stop being so cranky, Sam. I use it, I'll tell you, for me, the key time that has formed is like when I put Saul to bed, I got to sit outside his door still. I know he's 7. He's got to grow up a little bit, but I can put my headphones on, 15 minutes, boom. By the time he's asleep, I have absorbed a book that I wouldn't, frankly, I'm not going to read. I don't need to know the pros on all that. I just want the takeaways. And then there are books that I don't want to read, but I feel like I should know what's in there. I'm probably going to may do the Michelle Obama thing just so that I can feel like I know what's going on in the world with other people that are not me. And Blowout by Rachel Maddow. Check that out on Blinkist. Right now, Blinkist has a special offer for our audience. Go to Blinkist.com/Majority Report. You start your 7-day free trial, and then you get 25% off a Blinkist premium membership and up to 65% off of audiobooks. Yours to keep forever, Matt. That's Blinkist, spelled Blinkist. Blinkist.com/Majority Report. Get 25% off a premium membership and a 7-day free trial. Blinkist.com/Majority Report. And lastly, you've probably heard me talk about Brooklinen multiple times. All of my sheets are Brooklinen. Now, my pillows are as well. I have now come to understand why people like those big plush pillows. Brooklinen has made it possible for me. But there's one more thing now that I have now Brooklinenized. That's TM. I just did that myself. They're towels. They give your daily routines something a little extra. You get out of the shower, all of a sudden you feel it's like I'm in a spa. It's perfectly fine to stay in your towel all day after your shower, apparently, as well. I'm not even wearing pants. Get a towel wrapped around me right now from Brooklinen. No, honestly, these towels are worthy of the Brooklinen name. The sheets are amazing, super high quality, super comfortable, and the towels are the same. Very plush. You get to choose actually how plush you like them. I don't go full boat. I go the middle size. That's the way I always do with all this stuff. I go the middle plushness. Brooklinen is the perfect place to find all the comforts for home, including these ultra soft towels. They're so confident in their products that everything comes with a lifetime warranty. Use promo code Majority. You get 10% off your first order at brooklinen.com. That's Brooklinen, BROOKLINEN.com, promo code Majority. Brooklinen, everything you need to live your most comfortable life. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Professor of History and African American Studies at the University of Houston, author of The Dawning of the Apocalypse, The Roots of Slavery, White Supremacy, Settler Colonialism, and Capitalism in the Long 16th Century, Gerald Horne will be with us in just a moment. We are back. Sam Cedar on the Majority Report on the phone. A pleasure to welcome back to the show. Professor of History and African American Studies at the University of Houston, author of 30 books, at least. And his most recent, The Dawning of the Apocalypse, Roots of Slavery, White Supremacy, and Settler Colonialism and Capitalism in the Long 16th Century. Professor Gerald Horne, welcome back to the program.
Thank you for inviting me.
So one of the things I want to just start a little bit more general, because one of the things that I really enjoy about your work is that it seems like you have pursued a topic and then realized that there is a predicate that is missing, and you have done that timeless times to where you are back to the mid 1400s. Will you just talk about your perspective on history and that process, and then, just to set the table as to how we can then start to move forward, I guess, in time?
Well, I'm trying to understand how so many people from so many parts of the world, myself with roots in Africa, I assume your roots are in Europe, how we all wind up in North America speaking a language, English, that in the 1500s was the language of a minor kingdom on the outskirts of Western Europe. And so in order to answer that question, I've been going back in time. My previous book was on the 17th century. This book ostensibly is dealing with the 16th century, but actually, in some ways, I'm going back to 1095 and the origins of what were called the Crusades. That is to say, this effort by Western European Christendom to retake what they called the Holy Land, which they thought was unjustly and improperly under the domain of Muslim powers. And so I think that what I'm trying to do is to try to understand the past so that I can have a better understanding of the present. I mean, for example, when you go to a doctor, oftentimes a doctor takes a detailed medical history. And that is not just because the doctor is a student of the past. The doctor is trying to understand your present so the doctor can prescribe a detailed treatment plan and a diagnosis. And so that's what I'm trying to do by going back in time in history.
So you are also in the process of doing that. You are in many respects revising what you call the creation myth of how of both the settler colonialism and how the United States were formed. All right. So where you're going back to the Crusades, and then we are at least in terms of I guess the saga of what ultimately will be the United States. We're also at the Ottoman Empire in 1450. How does the Ottoman Empire, essentially going after Constantinople here, where does that lead us from there?
Well, you have to understand the religious conflict in some ways mirrors, if not was more excessive and more extreme than the ideological conflicts of the 20th century. I'm sure you're familiar, I know that you're familiar, for example, with the existential terror that was induced by the rise of fascism in Germany and Italy and Europe. That was an ideological conflict, for example. In 1453, when Muslim powers, the Ottoman Turks, seized what was then called Constantinople from Christian powers, that induces a kind of existential terror in the Christian powers, particularly Spain. And as the Ottoman Turks begin to move west, it seems as if Spain, which fortunately for its sake faces the Atlantic Ocean, begins to move west as well, because there's a fear that with the Ottomans seizing what becomes Istanbul, that the trade routes to the riches of the East, Persia, India, China, are blocked, and therefore there's a desire to move west to find a new route to India, for example, which is why when Christopher Columbus, sponsored by Spain, bumps into the Americas, he calls the indigenous inhabitants Indians, and that's why even today, the Caribbean nations oftentimes are referred to as the West Indies, for example. And that process, instigated by Columbus, helps to bring millions across the Atlantic, ultimately, not only Europeans, but also Africans, to create this new regime that we are now faced with in North America.
So that begins the process, as it were, and you say that 1492 was a hinge moment for Western Europe.
Well, that's correct. It's not only Columbus, but it's also that the Spanish, or what we call the Spanish, finally outs Muslim control of the Iberian Peninsula. Recall that Muslim powers had basically controlled Spain for hundreds of years up until 1492. And it's also in 1492 that you see that the Spanish expelled the Jewish population, the Sephardim, which then go on to play a major role with regard to the story that I tell. And in fact, you can't understand the answer to the question I posed at the top, which is why we're sitting here speaking English and not Spanish, in light of the fact that Spain had the first mover's advantage, without understanding religious conflict. That is to say, the Protestant Reformation instigated by Martin Luther in 1517 sweeps into England, as we know, in the 1530s, which helps to induce a round of religious conflict, murderous religious conflict. England wants its role at the table in the Americas, but unlike Spain, which demanded a religious qualification for settlement, that is to say, you had to be Catholic in order to be a settler in the Spanish colonies in the Americas, the scrappy underdog that was England did not take that religious route. It moved instead to pan-Europeanism, and which allowed it to incorporate the Sephardim in terms of settlers. And that's even more striking in light of the fact that England itself had expelled its Jewish population for the most part in 1291, 200 years before the Spanish did. It turns out that the English route, that is to say, this route of pan-Europeanism, which morphs into this new identity or relatively new identity that's called whiteness, is the winning ticket, which then manages to outstrip Spanish religious sectarianism and allows England to move into what it calls Virginia by 1607, thereby inaugurating a process that leads to the United States by, say, 1776.
Okay, and I really want to sort of like walk through what you just said slowly, because this is I find this so fascinating, and it tells us so much about the questions of the relationship between it seems to me racism and capitalism, and obviously, white supremacy and settler colonialism. What was it? So in some way, what I am gathering from your work is that what's happening at that time, it's almost like water will find its lowest, the lowest point. And it like there is no, it's not so much a plan here, but it's just a constant improvisation to achieve an end goal. And that England never set out to be, I guess, more ecumenical, but it was just like that. We need bodies. We need some power here, and we can't do it under a religious. If the litmus test is religious, we're going to lose this battle with Spain.
Well, in fact, you're using the term improvisation that I use. I also use the term contingencies. That is to say that what unfolds is not necessarily based upon an architectural blueprint by some around the table in London. In many ways, it's just adapting to circumstances. For example, when the Spanish move into what they call St. Augustine, Florida in 1565, and St. Augustine, Florida, as you know, builds itself as the longest continuously settled urban node in North America, there is a religious qualification, but what happens is that they not only have enslaved Africans, they also, because they have a religious qualification, if you were an African who professed Catholicism, you could be a conquistador. And for example, in Cuba, which is also a settlement of Spain, as you well know, there historically were not only Black conquistadors, there was a larger so-called free Negro population, much larger proportionally than had ever existed in the North American settlements dominated by London. But London had a problem, as noted, because there weren't enough Protestants to go around, so they adapt to this pan-Europeanism. Spain, when London moves into what it calls Virginia in 1607, wants to do something about it. It wants to move north to oust and fight the English, to oust them from Virginia, but they're tied down in Florida, fighting this alliance between Native Americans and Africans. And because they have this idea of religious sectarianism, they're not, unlike the English, they're not able to attract the Jewish population, the Protestant population, etc. As a matter of fact, because of the Inquisition, which is a process inaugurated in Spain and accelerates post-1492, if you wind up in Florida and say that you're Jewish and say that you're Protestant, you're likely to be tortured at best, decapitated at worst.
And so we have, obviously, I mean, I guess centuries upon centuries of examples of slavery up until this point, but it had been a function of religiosity for the most part, as opposed to racial slavery, which was I guess, an innovation.
Well, I guess that's one way to put it. I mean, keep in mind that the other major power, the Ottoman Turks, were equal opportunity enslavers. They enslaved Africans, to be sure, but they also enslaved Europeans. As the history of Albania and Bosnia and Kosovo and Bulgaria and Macedonia tend to suggest. The Spanish, of course, enslaved countless numbers of indigenous people. They enslaved Africans, but for hundreds of years, for decades, they also enslaved people that we would call Filipinos. Recall that it was in the 1500s that the Spanish arrived in this Pacific archipelago that was named after King Philip, speaking of the Philippines. And from that point forward, they began to drag Filipinos across the Pacific to Mexico. It was the, quote, innovation, unquote, of London to a certain extent to focus like a laser beam with regard to enslaving Africans, although, of course, they did enslave indigenous populations too, when they were not ousting them altogether and expelling them from their land and selling them into slave markets as far away as North Africa, or even to slave markets in Turkey. Because one of the reasons we're sitting here speaking English is that the English brokered an alliance with the Muslims, particularly with the Ottoman Turks and to a certain degree with the Moroccans. And they had a mutual antagonist in Catholic Spain. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, of course, is still a staple of international diplomacy. And it was that alliance that helped to weaken Spain, that helped to propel England forward. And in fact, as I tell the story, a turning point in the precipitous decline of Africa comes when the English and the Moroccans joined together to wage war on the Songhai Empire in what is now today's Mali, which, interestingly enough, is also a Muslim power as well, but obviously that did not count for much. And the destabilization of this relatively strong state in the heart of Africa has negative knock-on effects, ricocheting and cascading as far south as today's Nigeria, softening up West Africa for the onrushing African slave trade, in which the English play a primary and paramount role.
And what, I mean, obviously, people enslave other people for free labor, but what were the needs, and what was the compulsion, I guess? I mean, what is it that is driving both the expansion and the trade? Is it just simply a desire to have more goods? Is there domestic pressures that exist in the various European, I guess, kingdoms at that time? And what was their the varied uses of slavery at that time?
Well, I think that accumulation of wealth is the easy answer to your question. But of course, there are layers and additions that are added subsequently. In my book on the 17th century, I talk about how when the English arrived in Barbados in the 1600s, initially, when they're bringing Africans across the Atlantic, supposedly this was done because they were going to introduce them to Christianity. And for the longest, they're referred to as heathens and non-Christians. And at a certain point, that shifts, and they're referred to as an inferior being, that is to say, referred to as Black. But I think that it's important to point out that the African slave trade is one of the most profitable enterprises known to humankind. You can invest $1 and get $1,700 back. I dare say that there are some, even today, who might sell their firstborn for a 1,700% profit. This also had other spin-off effects. That is to say, in order to bring European settlers across the Atlantic and enslaved Africans across the Atlantic, that presupposes ships, which presupposes a shipbuilding industry, presupposes the creation of a working class in England itself that has wages, that then can use those pounds to buy food, to buy other products, which then leads to production of those goods as well. It also presupposes the existence of an insurance industry, because oftentimes Africans did not willingly cross the Atlantic. They rebelled on ship, and therefore investors could suffer a loss, and where insurance comes in. And as any investor in the insurance industry can tell you, even today, insurance industry is a major way to generate profit, because, of course, part of the trick is not to pay back after the person who's paid the premium, after they come to you with a claim. And so then this creates a pool of capital that then could go into banking, and then the banks could lend out money to other spin-off industries as well. And so it creates, from London's point of view, a virtuous circle leading to a tremendous explosion and expansion of wealth. But at the same time, of course, it creates countless misery, not least for those who are enslaved.
And so, I mean, we're talking about nascent capitalism here, driving the expansion on some level.
Oh, absolutely, we are. I mean, and it's fair to say that England is paramount in terms of this process. It allows the creation of the British Empire, where the sun never sets. That is to say, London eventually develops this empire that spans the globe, with India in some ways being the crown jewel of the British Empire. But keep in mind that before the development of India as the crown jewel of the empire, in the middle part of the 1700s, perhaps the most profitable part of the British Empire, even more profitable than in settlements in North America, were the Caribbean colonies, particularly Jamaica, Barbados, Antigua, where you had the production of these cash crops like sugar. Sugar was not only used to sweeten your tea. Using sugar was seen as a mark of sophistication as well. Some even saw it as a miracle drug. And the wealth that was generated by sugar is still rather mind-boggling in retrospect. Some of the titans of these sugar plantations in Jamaica, Barbados, etc., had a net worth that in some ways was larger than any of their compatriots in London itself, not to mention in the settlements in North America that eventuated in the creation of the United States of America.
So we have this nascent capitalist system that requires that not only requires free labor, but commodifies the free labor and builds a whole industry around the process of providing free labor. And so at what point, I mean, so we get to, we're in the United States. The British have decided that they cannot get the bodies they need of free men, I guess, to fight the Spanish unless they basically say, you know, we're more ecumenical. And therefore, to justify slavery, they can't use religion in the way that it has been in the past to justify slavery, right? And so they develop this construct of race, which is a function of everybody who's coming from Europe is one thing, and then everybody who's not is another thing.
Well, yes, and you need to see this once again as a kind of improvisation, number one. Secondly, you need to see it as a kind of, to put it in the cinematic terms, as a slow motion dissolve, as opposed to a snapshot, for example. It's an elongated process, but I think that it also carries lessons for today. I mean, for example, when you have the development of the U.S. Constitution and the First Amendment guaranteeing freedom of religion. Even today, if you go into many classrooms, absent the pandemic, you would see professors and listen to professors talking about how this was a product of the European Enlightenment and how it represented in the minds of men, because we're talking about mostly men, a step forward in terms of their consciousness. I tend to see it as an improvisation, that is to say that London had to, and the settlers following London had to move away from religious sectarianism because it was not a useful tool to build a powerful state. And I think that carries implications for today, because now that we've had decades, if not centuries, of development in the United States of America, it doesn't surprise me, at least, that within this regard to the recent Supreme Court term, you've had a kind of backsliding with regard to religious sectarianism, with regard to the Supreme Court issuing decisions that give Christian organizations more authority to high and fire people on the basis of religion, giving Christian entities based on their theology the right to grant or not grant or even mention whether women should have the right to contraceptive services pursuant to what we call Obamacare. And I think, if I may be so modest, if you like, that the point I'm putting forward, that these are not necessarily these philosophical reforms as much as they're reforms that are designed to propel and perpetuate a certain kind of settler colonialism, a certain kind of way of confronting rebellious Africans, confronting rebellious indigenous populations. I think that the latter is a sounder way to understand U.S. history and to understand what's happening today.
So, in other words, it's a pragmatic decision made by people who still have this agenda of accumulating wealth and power, and they're just looking around and seeing what they have in their quiver at any given point. And there are, over time, what's in that quiver changes and sometimes returns to the mean. I mean, I feel like we could notice that in the context of, in our modern era, when we lose the Soviet threat, we develop new threats that appear. When and down to when the Republican Party loses homophobia as an electoral tool, it becomes more focused on transphobia or other issues. Because it's just sort of searching for an arrow in its quiver that will function in the same way as the last arrow that no longer is effective.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I wasted a lot of time yesterday watching on C-SPAN this presentation from the Trump Hotel in Washington by the House Freedom Caucus. I'm sure you're familiar with these right-wingers in Congress, in a joint symposium with the Liberty University of Mr. Falwell. And it was all focused on China. And it was a fire-breathing exercise. And I think it's fair to say, particularly after watching Michael Pompeo, the U.S. Secretary of State's speech, not coincidentally at the Nixon Library in Yorba Linda, California, just a few days ago, where he basically signaled not only the launch of a new Cold War against China, but in some ways an effort at regime change with regard to China, that it's apparent that Washington has found a new enemy, which then will help to generate ever larger Pentagon budgets. It will help to focus the mind. And interestingly enough, one of their major themes at the Freedom Caucus was that the Black Lives Matter protests from the Atlantic to the Pacific are basically sponsored by the Chinese Communist Party. I kid you not. And so this will also be a way to help to discredit these protests, because supposedly they're tied to the newest foreign antagonist of the United States of America. And so it goes.
That's funny. I have to say, my sense is that the China thing is not quite as new as that. I think there's a long lineage I recall when I first started doing radio, we interviewed Gary Hart, who had that. I think you'll recall this, that he and I think it was Rudman had were tasked at the beginning of this century to create a panel on the 21st century security risks to the United States of America. And Hart had told me this story where they sat around a big table. There was 25 of them or so. They had invited people in. They went through each person. What are the greatest threats to the United States? Maybe one or two people said climate change, but for the most part, they all said non-state actors, potentially attacking the United States. This was in literally, I think, months before 9/11. And one person said China, and everybody sort of dismissed that person. And they met again 3 or 4 months later, I guess, to sort of like, having digested their first meeting, went around the whole thing. Again, that one person again said China, and everybody sort of dismissed it. And that person never came back to any of the meetings. And my understanding is that person was Lynn Cheney. And so that, it was out there. I mean, I think those Project for a New American Century people had some of those neocons had been thinking about China for a long time in terms of, once the wall fell. But we're a bit afar afield. I want to go back to that, go back 400 or 500 years. Okay. To I'm also fascinated, like why were the British in need of the Sephardic Jews? Was that because there was the Jews going into the diaspora provided a sort of a pre-existing network in which to get goods to the colonies, or what was that?
Well, first of all, if you look at the Jewish population of the Iberian Peninsula, even though they were ostensibly expelled by Spain and also Portugal, I should add, in the late 1400s, there is evidence to suggest that they may even have been on the boat with Columbus. There's evidence to suggest that when the Spanish, from their perch in what we now call Mexico, began to send settlers northward to what we now call New Mexico, that leading the formations, leading the troops and the settlers were actually so-called crypto-Jews or New Christians, conversos, to use those various terms. Now, with regard to the English and also the Dutch, because in some ways the Dutch were a stalking horse for London, in some ways the Dutch, who were also predominantly Protestant, were ahead of England in terms of developing some of these forces we're talking about. For example, Pan-Europeanism, for example, capitalism, for example, republicanism. And when the Sephardim were expelled, they dispersed all over the place. And so when England began to make their overtures to this population, they had what were called these diaspora networks. Their compatriots, their co-religionists in the four corners of the world who could supply trading routes, trading intelligence, commercial intelligence, etc. London found that to be quite useful. And as you know, a turning point in terms of the Jewish population moving to North America comes in the middle part of the 17th century, let's say the 1650s, when Oliver Cromwell, who temporarily had dislodged the monarch and had led to the beheading of the monarch, basically makes a kind of pact with the Jewish community, which then blossomed after London ousted the Dutch from Manhattan in 1664. And even before then, you had a Jewish population moving into Manhattan, despite a kind of anti-Semitism by Peter Stuyvesant and other Dutch leaders. And so in sum and in capsule, that's how the Sephardim figure into London's calculations.
I want to just also go through that process of I mean, and my sense is from what you've written is that it's, there's no one sitting in a room going, what we need to do is create this these racial divisions as a way of greasing the wheels in slavery, so that we can diminish the moral compunctions, and we can commodify these people. And but how did that process work? I mean, once there was a sort of a sense in England that, look, sectarianism is just not going to work for us because we need these people. So like, where does the steps go from there? Or is it just simply looking around going like, oh, wait a second, there, I'm looking across the Mediterranean, and I realize like, oh, I see a distinction that is not going to get caught up in religion. I mean, how does that happen?
Well, first of all, one of the things you learn in graduate school in history, although it's not always observed, is that history is argument without end. Now, I'm telling one story. Let us say that magically and mysteriously tomorrow, a bunch of letters of Oliver Cromwell arises in London, where he says specifically something that contradicts my story about improvisation and contingency. That will lead to a new story being written. But in any case, as of now, this is my story, and I'm sticking to it because this is what the evidence tends to suggest, which is that London is the scrappy underdog. It does not have many options in terms of getting a place at the banquet of colonialism, since Spain has the first mover's advantage. And at the same time, as noted, it makes sense for London to ally with the Sephardim, who, needless to say, many of them are quite bitter about what befell them when they were subjected to the Inquisition and expelled altogether. And a similar process happens to the Muslims in Spain as well. They're subjected to the Inquisition by the early 1600s. They're expelled altogether from Spain, but they're just across the Mediterranean from Muslim powers, including Morocco. And so it doesn't take some sort of savant of diplomacy in London to figure out who you should align with. And interestingly enough, this kind of thinking is echoed and mirrored in the plays of Shakespeare with regard to his Othello character, with regard to what many have pointed out to his favorable portrayals and depictions of Muslims, because this was the line that was coming from London at that particular moment in history.
So what was were there foundation? I mean, like for me, it seems easier for me to see where there would be foundations for religious, where there would be foundations for sectarianism, right? And that, this is the way that kings would justify their rule for centuries. God and our perception of what God is has deemed me, the ruler, and everything that you get is a function of what that God has done. And so, society is constructed in such a way where the authority of religion holds. Where does it, what is your sense of what provided that foundation for seeing, for the construct of race?
Well, as I tell the story, one of the problems dealing with race and racism is that, in my estimation, it has religious roots. And this is not necessarily my opinion. I think a scholarly consensus is developing. For example, one scholar who I quote suggests that lynching, this barbaric practice of the late 19th century, early 20th century, first few decades of 20th century in the United States, particularly in Dixie, where Black men in particular are hung from trees and hundreds, perhaps thousands, en masse. Sometimes they're burning crosses. this scholar tends to see lynching as a kind of quasi-religious process. And one of the reasons I go back to
KKK would burn crosses.
With regard,
I mean, the KKK would burn crosses.
Say it again.
Yeah, the KKK would burn crosses.
Exactly. Well, it's part of this Christian KKK, of course, thought that it was a Christian organization. In their rhetoric and their verbiage, they had many references to what they called Anglo-Saxonism, and in fact, in their second iteration around World War I, about 100 years ago, they even revived the religious wars. They proudly proclaimed that they were Protestants. They harassed Catholics, except in Louisiana, where you had a white majority, particularly southern Louisiana, which was predominantly Catholic. But in northern Louisiana, up around Shreveport, where it was predominantly Protestant, they tended to be anti-Catholic. And so what I try to suggest is that what some would call the sort of othering process, that it begins with Muslims. And then keep in mind that when the African slave trade takes off, it initially takes off in areas of Africa that are predominantly Muslim. That is to say, today's Senegal, today's Gambia, for example. And therefore, the Africans who were brought across the Atlantic, it's easy to see them as a kind of religious other, and then it becomes simpler for them to morph into being a so-called inferior racial other.
It's fascinating, and I want to just also tie one other thing in before we go, and I feel like I could talk to you all day, frankly, but there feels like there's a certain symmetry between the idea of racial oppression being a function in this country, anyways. Being a function of this these what would be perceived from an American's perspective as like a sort of an international international machinations, as it were. And then if you come back around to things like why we rolled back Jim Crow era laws and why we had things like the Civil Rights Act, and was in many respects also sort of a function of our standing internationally. Can you just speak about that, about how that works, about that relationship between, how much of phenomena and struggle is not, which I think often we have, and I am certainly guilty of this, a myopia in seeing it as a domestic phenomena when in fact it is actually a world phenomena.
Well, I'm glad you raised that, because before I started going back in time, I started as a 20th century historian writing about the civil rights movement and the movement against Jim Crow. And now many historians have taken up that mantle, and there is now a historical consensus that suggests that when Jim Crow began to retreat in the 1950s and the 1960s, it was due in no small measure to the pressures of the Cold War, with Washington competing with Moscow for hearts and minds, particularly in resource-rich areas of Africa and the Caribbean, but found that Washington's domestic policy with regard to Jim Crow was a hindrance in that regard, and that creates momentum for the agonizing retreat from Jim Crow. In fact, the State Department files a brief in the Brown versus Board of Education decision, 1954, which marks at least the juridical termination of Jim Crow, suggesting the point that I just made, that Jim Crow is a hindrance in terms of the retreat, in terms of the execution of U.S. foreign policy. But as you know, that was not a unanimously agreed upon consensus from the Atlantic to the Pacific. You had these riots in Little Rock, Arkansas in 1957, when there was an attempt to desegregate schools. Riots in Oxford, Mississippi in 1962, when there was an attempt to have one black student, James Meredith, enter that hallowed institution. Riots in Boston, Massachusetts in the 1970s over desegregation and the so-called busing crisis. In New York in the 1980s, the crisis over desegregation of housing in Yonkers. And so I think that historians, oftentimes, at least some historians, have overestimated the extent to which these changes, these profound changes that had deep historical roots, that is to say, this agonizing retreat from Jim Crow, which has deep roots in the 1500s, the extent to which this was greeted warmly and unanimously by masses. I think that instead we have to look at it as a movement from below, led by Martin Luther King and his colleagues in the civil rights movement, assisted from forces from above, the U.S. Supreme Court, the U.S. State Department responding to Cold War pressures, et cetera.
Is there an analog in today, or a lack of an analog? I mean, where we have a lot of things going on in this country right now. To what are we untethered from that internationalism? I mean, if we are, is the fact that we're untethered also having implications?
I'm afraid so, and that's what keeps me up at night. That is to say, like many, I've been heartened by these post-May 25th, 2020 protests ignited by the killing on camera of George Floyd, which has led to tremendous change in just 2 months. Some symbolic, like the taking down of statues, and some more substantive, like movements to have police only execute duties where a man or woman with a gun is needed, and not necessarily execute duties when a social worker would do, like dealing with a mentally challenged or dealing with a neighbor complaining about a noise complaint. There have been tremendous changes, but I'm concerned as a historian that I don't necessarily see the international gust in our sails, which worries me, because to go back to my watching this Freedom Caucus symposium, it makes me worry that certain demagogic forces will be able to suggest that, in fact, these protests are basically the work, and we're just the pawn of a foreign power, and therefore need to be discredited, which would therefore lead to repression of this movement. End of story.
So, I mean, is it because it's untethered to any type of other international movement that creates a vacuum that is going to be filled? In other words, like, do you need to tie in a movement in this country to some other international a movement as a way of preventing someone else coming in and redefining it as having other roots, or what is that? Is that what you're saying?
Well, in part, that's what I'm saying. And I'm also looking at the battlefield. I'm also looking at the fact that Mr. Trump got 63 million votes in November 2016. As of today, despite the polls, many of which were inaccurate in 2016, we can't say decisively that he'll be turned out of office in November 2020. And despite the fact that you have this Black Lives Matter movement, it's a decentralized movement, unlike movements of the past. Even Martin Luther King's movement had a certain kind of centralization through the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and which he headed, in which, of course, he had lieutenants. There was a centralized body that was plotting strategy. You don't have that sort of thing with the Black Lives Matter movement. And then, number two, it makes it difficult to broker alliances abroad. I mean, for example, just a few weeks ago at the United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva, Switzerland, the African Union introduced a resolution calling for a commission of inquiry into systemic racism in the United States based upon what they saw with regard to George Floyd. But the movement in the United States was basically ignorant of this momentous development, of this momentous outreach by the African Union, the Pan-African transcontinental body headquartered in Ethiopia. And that's one of the many reasons why the resolution failed. And so that sort of lack of connection I find quite concerning, because I think that as we try to plot strategy, we have to recognize the nature of the battlefield, And we have to recognize that just like in the 1950s, when you had Brown versus Board of Education, that was not necessarily agreed with unanimity, certainly not in Little Rock, Arkansas. And I don't think, quite frankly, that some of these changes that are taking place now are not necessarily being greeted with unanimity.
Right.
And I think that we may be shocked to find a quiet riot at the polls on November 3rd, 2020.
And just to sort of map out like how what the value of that type of international alliance is, that if there is domestic support for and increased sort of like public support for that that resolution headed by Ethiopia, you also, it seems to me, it can also go the other way too, where you say, you know, if you're concerned about China's expansion, you know, you're going to need, you know, some connection with Ethiopia, right? I mean, like China's pouring just tremendous amount of money into Africa, and I, you know, my understanding is that much of the economic development in Ethiopia has been driven by Chinese investment, and there is an opportunity to leverage that the fear of an emerging China to leverage that by saying, like, you know, if you want to develop these relationships in Africa, you I mean, not unlike during the Jim Crow era, you need to respond to their concerns.
Well, you know, I was thinking of that as I was watching the Freedom Caucus Symposium at the Trump Hotel, because many of the speakers, many of the congressmen who were speaking, there were mostly congressmen who were speaking, including Dan Crenshaw of Texas, Ted Yoho of Florida, et cetera, Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee, for example, and Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas. They kept talking about how it's mandatory for Washington to develop global alliances in order to confront China. And as I was watching that, I was thinking of Mr. Trump's hostility to the European Union, his referring to certain African countries as being no more than F-holes, to use that euphemism. And I was wondering how they're going to work out those conflicting and contrasting lines. And I'm not so sure how it's going to work out, how it's going to play out.
Well, Professor, it is always a real pleasure and honor to talk to you. The book is The Dawning of the Apocalypse: The Roots of Slavery, White Supremacy, Settler Colonialism, and Capitalism in the Long 16th Century, which we should say, you know, for whatever reason, that century was particularly long. It ran from the mid 1400s to into the 1600s. Thank you so much for your time today. Fascinating stuff. And we will put a link to that book at majority.fm.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right, folks. I should say that you could do a lot worse if you wanted to learn a tremendous about the just a wide range. I mean, if you really wanted to understand race and capitalism and the development of the United States and internationalism, just go to Gerald Horne's, I don't know, does he have a Wikipedia page or something like that? Find his bibliography. And
it's got a whole bookshelf.
Yeah, and read all of those and get back to us, and you basically will know more than 99.95% of the world's population. It's just unbelievable. I don't know how that guy has time to watch C-SPAN. Right, had time to do this interview.
He's like the David Dayen of his type of history.
Exactly. It's just I guarantee you he's one of those guys who's like, yeah, no, I get about an hour and a half of sleep a night. And then I write from like, 10 p.m. to 4 a.m.
That's the best. Well, I mean, I couldn't do that, but I mean, like the guys who write, like Perry Anderson, there's a lot of historians that are like this. And you just think like, that'd be the life, just writing history all day.
Oh my gosh. It really is. His stuff is just fascinating. Folks, we're going to take a break. We're going to head into the fun half. We may have some technical difficulties because apparently like there's a tornado watch in my neighborhood. There is a hurricane or what is the remnants of it is hitting New York City. So, bear with us if we have some technical issues. In the meantime, just a reminder, it is your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you support the free show, and you then get extra content virtually every day. And I don't want to say every day. And by, of course, day, I mean business days or weekdays, but almost every day. So head over to jointhemajorityreport.com, become a member. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. I have to say, like, this has been, it's a very difficult time living through a pandemic. It's been particularly trying in these parts. It's really basically Just Coffee and Sunset Lake CBD, which is getting me through this, I think, at this point. And I alternate. I go back and forth over the course of a day and ingest all that stuff. So check out those sponsors. Also, don't forget AM Quickie. You go to amquickie.com, you sign up. You can watch it on YouTube at Majority Report Live, our YouTube, our audio channel. Or you can just get it as a podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. We have it out every morning by about 8 a.m. amquickie.com. And is Nomi? Oh, we have Nomi.
Hello.
Nomi, what is going on your show?
So this is that time of the year when we talk about DNC things, and as much as I really just want to get over DNC stuff, it is a thing. So we're talking about the platform committees and the rules committee, and that's with Jim Zogby. I do a little bit of an explainer myself. Jim Zogby is a longtime DNC member, former executive committee member. We were unruly on the Unity Reform Commission together. The two of us were like... So we have a great conversation about that, and then we talk about evictions, the eviction crisis with Zach Newman, who works in that space, and he's been fighting for tenants really across the country since COVID-19 started. He started a project, so a lot of people are facing eviction right now. We're going to cover it again next week as well, just because it's a continuous fight, unfortunately.
All right, folks, and where can they find your program?
Yeah, it is at The Nomi Key Show, NOMIKI, on YouTube. And same thing at patreon.com/The Nomi Key Show. We're going to be doing, I guess I should say this now. I haven't talked to you about it, but we should talk about this. We're doing a special DNC daily show, which is like
during the convention.
Very ambitious, yes.
Oh, great.
But I have so many guests, so many people I want to bring in. And, this is obviously something I have a lot of experience working through. So, we might even bring in some folks that we don't agree with just so we can debate a little bit.
You should do that.
They don't like that, and they also like being on camera, so it's perfect.
Good.
So we're doing that for the DNC, and then we might do it for the RNC yet. Not sure yet, but definitely
when is the DNC?
The 17th through, it's 4 days, so what is that, 21st of August.
Okay.
So about 2 weeks from now, it starts up. And, much of it will be virtual. But, we're going to touch on everything from, like, the money, who the donors are, how these committees are set up, what are their agendas, and, what's the purpose of a convention anyways.
And what about the VP pick? I'm of the mind that, the VP pick will either, and I'm not even talking electorally. Mm-hmm. I don't think that the VP is going to have that much of an implication electorally. I mean, it may give Donald Trump something to talk about, but I don't think it's going to move people. I don't think people are going to be that concerned.
Right.
But it does have implications as to the direction of the party going forward, or at least who will have resources and what segment of the party will have resources to build something.
Mm-hmm.
Going forward. So it seems to me that the there's a lot of people who are invested in that question, it seems.
Well, and there's just the reality of the vice president who Joe Biden picks will most likely be the next nominee for the Democratic Party. Joe Biden is no young chicken, spring chicken. So
that's my understanding. Yes, that is my understanding.
That's the big elephant in the room here. So we are actually picking the future of the party. And, my guess is, I don't think this takes rocket science. The neoliberal establishment sees the writing on the wall generationally. They see where the change is happening, and they probably want to find somebody who's on the younger end who can carry the neoliberal legacy into the next generation and beyond. On one hand, I think that's a concern of theirs, and then they have a lot of donors that they have.
Who
to
is
please.
that?
I think the only person, I'm not saying this is who's going to be the choice, but I think if you're taking the generational choice, it's Kamala.
Right.
There are a lot of other people who are, and maybe there's someone we're just not aware of that hasn't been floated in the media, but there are these media wars. They're going after Kamala hard right now, which makes me think that she's definitely the front runner. And I think she's probably, Obama has expressed how much he likes her. Obama, we can't forget. He's still young and he's out there.
Absolutely.
Hustling.
Of course. Biden knows.
This is Obama's choice.
Biden knows his nomination to Obama. I think everybody knows that. I think that's, if he doesn't step in and convince Buttigieg and I can't even remember her name now, to drop out. Yeah, Klobuchar to drop out, then I think it's a different ball game. All right. Also, folks, don't forget, check out the Antifada. You can find that at patreon.com/the Antifada. And Matt, what do we have on your multitude of projects?
Yeah, so tonight on TMBS YouTube channel, we're going to be doing a Q&A. Me, David Griscom, and Leisha Brooks. We'll just be doing a short Q&A. We'll get to regular programming in a week or two. But tonight, normal time, 7 p.m., we'll be streaming, taking questions from Discord and Patreon members, as well as the chat. So tune in there. And also, Literary Hangover will resume once TMBS resumes. So once I get things in order here, we'll get it going.
Folks, don't forget Blinkist takes the key insights from over 3,000 nonfiction bestsellers in over 27 categories. I can't even imagine what those, I couldn't come up with 27 categories of anything. It condenses them down into blinks, which you can read or listen to in 15 minutes. Blinkist offers its members exclusive original podcasts too, from top authors and creative thinkers. Go to Blinkist.com/Majority Report. Start your 7-day free trial. When you love it, then you get 25% off a Blinkist premium membership and up to 65% off of audiobooks, which, Matt, you can keep forever. All right, folks, quick break. Fun half. Be right back.
You are in for it. All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Almost says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
I am a total cunt. Can we bring back DJ Danerky's song, please?
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danerky.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break for people.
That's fucking nonsense.
Hey, folks, reminder.
I do not have Parkinson's.
And the alpha males are...
Psych. Fuck them. Almost says what? Almost says what? A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black. African and the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck 'em. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy. I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are back. Africans are black.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy.
Total pussy.
A show, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 509 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? Oh, I lost him. All right. Calling from a 510 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
How's it going, Dad?
Hello? 510?
Hello? Dad?
Is this
Dad, can you hear me?
Yes, it is. Yes, I can hear you. Is this
Your son? Yes.
Call James Cash. How are you, sir?
How you doing, Sam?
Good.
Sam, I just want to say I'm the type of person who internalizes loss, and losing my friend Michael hit me pretty hard. I hadn't had really the nerve to say much other than some tweets. I got banned on Twitter. I came back just to pay my respects so everyone could see it, but I miss him a lot. It's really hard. Like, I'll look at like my text on my phone and he's not there. And you got to understand, Sam, when somebody like Michael handpicks you to have a voice, Michael personally selected me and pushed me because he liked what I was doing. And then now to be sort of on equal footing, having, my own show and, this and that and the other now over with a platform, and to have the person that personally wanted you to do it not be there and you're the same age, it's very painful. But one thing I will say is that in his passing, he knows that I love him. And that's the only thing that, when people pass, especially when it's sudden, it's the only thing that sort of, holds it together for me, is that he knew within my last message to him, which was probably about last week. Excuse me, 3 weeks ago, that he knew that I loved him. And that's what matters most.
Yeah. Well, it is. I think everybody's experiencing it. Some ways that is similar, in some ways that are, are unique to everybody. Had a different, their own relationship with them. But I appreciate where you're coming from. And also, I know, I should just mention that we had a call in a couple of weeks ago. I know there was a controversy that you had been done some stuff that I think you recognized was inappropriate in terms of the way that you were approaching some folks in our community. And I understand that you made a second bite at the apple of apologizing, and I think I thought it was a pretty heartfelt apology, and I think particularly Michael was very clear about the idea of redemption and whatnot, and I think that is an important principle that we have to have, where people can make mistakes and learn from them and change their behavior, and also recognize that what they've done and apologize. And I think you did that, and I appreciate that you did that.
Well, I just want to say for one, Sam, because the point of my call is I'm actually working this very second at a COVID positive hotel, so I can leak some stuff to you. But regardless of that, the key thing about that was that understanding certain boundaries that people have with a community that you're not normally used to interacting with. And then I think just the key thing is like communication, because I didn't sort of understand my position as a public figure. And I also am, interacting with a community that's completely new to me. So, and especially there's a lot of cultural differences and things like that. So the key thing was, when you make a mistake, do you keep making it? And this is something that I saw you actually say. It's like, after, you try to make amends, do you keep doing it? The thing is the first time I did it, I really didn't fully understood what happened. So, the first time I went at it, like, it didn't go over as well, even though I did it. And even though nothing had happened since, like, I think it was more better to have something more concrete. And also because I got banned on Twitter, nobody could see any apology anyway. So it's just getting used to other people's boundaries and the way other people communicate, and then just not making those same mistakes again, and understanding that I'm a public figure now, and that, that's something Michael understood much better than me about certain aspects of being a public figure, because I never really cared to be one outside of music. And that's pretty much what it comes down to, is that when you make a mistake, do you do it again? Does it happen again? Do you continue to do it? And that's really the mark of how you can press on.
Yeah. And growth. And I think that's good. All right. Well, so give us an update on the COVID hotel, COVID positive hotel. This is
okay.
What is it exactly that where is it? Like, what is it?
Okay. So I'm in the Bay Area. I'm not supposed to be making this call. So I'm in the Bay Area, and normally I work at a particular homeless shelter. But what's happened is so the county is pretty much drafting anyone they can. They're pulling from our resources and a bunch of other homeless shelter resources. So what they did was they transferred, let's say, one of my coworkers, works for the county. He's like a social worker. They converted him to a disaster worker. And the issue with that is that, we're basically, a lot of us are being transferred and moved around to things that we wouldn't normally do. So how it works is this: like, there's a hotel or motel. Like, in all honesty, like, all the hotels, like, they're all names. So how it works is you get, a client, you get their intake. I actually don't interact with anyone, say, for instance, face to face. So, but sometimes, like, certain circumstances sort of call for it. What I really am doing is sort of glorified babysitting, because unlike at the homeless shelter, some of these people aren't homeless. Some of these people are coming from prison, because San Quentin has a gigantic outbreak. When I do welfare checks by phone, I ask a couple of the other guys that are coming out of San Quentin who got early release, and they say that they're just like, dude, the authorities don't care. They don't care at all, and there's no protocol in prison, just judging from what those guys tell me. But I think the toughest thing also is, from working here, is the clients get here, and then when they get here, they're supposed to, like, quarantine for 15 days or whatever. But the problem is like, sort of, let's say, I'll give you an example of what happened yesterday. So first of all, 95%, because they have me here because I speak fluent Spanish. So 95% of the people here are Latino and Black. I mean, looking at my bed list right here, let's see, I have, out of 77 clients, 4 of them are white. So I also, yesterday I had an intake of a 3-year-old baby and the mom whose whole family has COVID. Like, it's some of the stuff is really, like, when you talk about kids, like, I have a son, like, yeah, there are plenty of kids here. And, when I look at certain case notes, it's like, okay, this person had it, and then that person had it. normally what we would normally have is sort of like guidance from the federal government.
Yeah.
Like we would get like sort of actual disaster workers out here instead of them pulling guys like me, but we don't have that. So here in California, they're just winging it the best way they can. I think probably the most heartbreaking thing for me was yesterday. I had to, normally, you know, we don't go out and run errands, but people
Right.
need stuff because people are constantly leaving their rooms. They're
Right.
constantly going outside because it's like you're in a hotel and people want things or they need things. You know, one guy, I need to wash my hair. I don't like
Right.
stuff like that. I'm just like, dude, you can't do that. But we probably the most heartbreaking yesterday. So this lady, you know, her kid has a fever, and it's like when it comes to giving out medication, we don't do that. But I broke that rule, and I went to
there
the store to
anybody-
get this kid Tylenol.
Is there anybody there who
What
is
was that?
providing? Is there anybody there providing medical service for these folks?
On the weekday, yeah, not on the weekend. So each person has a nurse practitioner, but on the weekend, there's really nothing. It's
Right.
us, and I'm only here until about 4, and then I'm gonna go to sleep and then work a all-nighter at this actual shelter I work at. I'm basically being worked. They're working me pretty hard.
Right.
But pretty much it's, you know, like I said, I had to go and acquire this kid Tylenol, and I just left it at the door because we're not really supposed to have contact, but it's like you can't help it, you know. But just the reality is that without a lot of federal guidelines, we're just winging it, because normally when stuff like this happens, there's just a lot more infrastructure for us to work with, but that's just not the case. And it's just it's tough, Sam. I'm not gonna lie. Like,
Well,
there's also a dispute right now between the county and local officials, because they don't know if, let's say we have someone who's here for 15 days. They don't know, like, should we test them again? Will they be positive? And then do we keep them longer? Like, there's a dispute on how we should go about that. Now, that dispute is only happening because we don't have federal, you know what I mean? We
yes,
don't have federal.
yeah, because
help with
everybody's
that,
got
you
their
know?
own. I mean, that is why we need a cohesive, comprehensive response to this pandemic, because it is not localized. That's the whole point. Well, Cole James Cash, I appreciate the call, and we will, we will set stuff up in the future. Thanks for calling.
Wish me luck out there, Dad.
Good luck. Good luck. Hang in there. Working overtime. Working overtime. Let's go to the messages. When Michael went on his meditation retreat, Patreon had an issue with its billing. Sam joked about Michael frantically running down the monastery steps in full garb, trying to find a laptop. I died laughing and always wish someone would animate that clip. That's from Brock from VA. Barrett Home, me too. Sam, do you have an opinion on Sanders' refusal to back Warren as the VP pick? I would imagine it is really just a function of she didn't endorse him. He doesn't endorse her. What do you think about that, Nomi?
Probably. I mean, I think that Warren, honestly, I think that Warren is in the game, but I don't think it's something that's likely to happen, partly because of the moment that we're in which, Black lives are rightfully so being brought, like people are learning about this movement. And I think that's why there's a lot of pressure for more progressive women of color. I read this article about like why Latinas and Latinos are not being highlighted in this moment. And I think it just goes back to the original point, which is I think he really wants to lean into this moment, and he should, honestly. So I just don't think the moment's for Warren for a lot of reasons. And, and she didn't,
Well, all right. Why is he going to expend capital when she wouldn't do it for him, and at a time where it is not like something that could happen? Now, the counter argument is she is going to hire people and use her resources to hire people who are more ideologically closer to Sanderistas, if you will. So I don't know.
But I don't know if I think like we have to remember at the end of the day that these people are politicians. They are movement leaders, but they're also politicians. And, if he knows that she is absolutely not going to be a vice presidential nominee, why would he do that?
Correct. Just got a message here. Where is it? Oh, okay. Folks, if you're in Missouri Amendment 2 on the ballot today. Expansion of Medicaid will provide over 200,000 people with Medicaid.
Also, Cori Bush. Today is the day. She is she's running for Congress. She's she's a movement leader, Black Lives Matter movement leader, a nurse. She had COVID while running. She's a matriarch, one of our original founders, and she's a JD candidate, and of course was endorsed by Bernie and members of the squad. So go out there and vote for her.
Yeesh. All right, I'm getting a lot of like tornado warning notices. Yeah.
I can hear the wind. I don't know if you can. I've turned a few times because branches will hit my window, but the wind is piling.
I cannot hear the wind.
Good.
Yeah, my tree in my backyard has been effectively pruned and debranched.
But if I all of a sudden am just like transported over, cut that and put that on YouTube. Make sure they don't demonetize.
Wait, can I tell you a story? I had that happen. I was on CNN. I'll clip it out and send it to everybody on Twitter. In 2016 at the Democratic Convention in Philadelphia, we were sitting outside on a CNN panel, live on air, like a tornado wind gusted through, blew the entire set on air over us. Sally Cohn was on air with us, and then like 2 seconds later, it cut away. But it's really funny footage.
You should post that.
We were safe, but it could happen.
Here is Donald Trump arguing that, as you know, he wants to. He's contemplating banning TikTok. Apparently, Microsoft has an opportunity to buy TikTok. They have 45 days to close this deal. Trump wants a taste because, well, of course, he's been hyping TikTok.
Suggested that he can go ahead, he can try. We set a date. I set a date of around September 15th, at which point it's going to be out of business in the United States. But if somebody, and whether it's Microsoft or somebody else buys it, that'll be interesting. I did say that if you buy it, whatever the price is, that goes to whoever owns it, because I guess it's China, essentially, but more than anything else. I said a very substantial portion of that price is going to have to come into the Treasury of the United States, because we're making it possible for this deal to happen. Right now, they don't have any rights unless we give it to them. So if we're going to give them the rights, then it has to come into this country. It's a little bit like the landlord-tenant. Without a lease, the tenant has nothing. So they pay what's called key money, or they pay something. But the United States should be reimbursed or should be paid a substantial amount of money.
What? It's the only law he knows.
I can't quite follow what the hell he's talking about.
I mean, it's the only thing he knows how to do is to skirt the landlord laws.
Is he talking about like a tariff? Is that essentially a tariff that he's talking about?
Beats me what he's trying to say.
It's like what you would pay a king, right?
Yeah, no, that's exactly it.
You need to provide some type of
TIF.
Yeah, you need to have a tribute to the king to come into the.
Yeah, you need to buy me off, essentially. Listen,
such a lunatic.
In New York, what we do is we pay our council member, and then they turn the other way, and then you can do it.
Right, exactly.
That's it.
Well, I mean, we've talked about Wayne Barrett.
Yep, that's how the first deal happened.
Wayne Barrett wrote extensively about how Donald Trump learned this from his father, on how you pay off local, councilmen or state reps or whatever it is, and that's how you do it. I mean, that was.
Yep.
And that's why he's so corrupt as president, because he was corrupt on the other side. And so he knows this is the way you do it, or that's his expectations. And I think they bring that, that sort of a small town pay to play disposition to national office. So
and he brought all of those New York actors, onto his campaign and into his inner circle. Listen, his first deal, I don't think they understand the significance of his style of deal making, because that's essentially he reinvented it in New York for real estate. And his first deal was not supposed to be passed through. The oversight board was literally paid off. They went to him and said, they went to the mayor and they went to the governor, who were both Democrats at the time, and said, get this deal through. My dad is your biggest donor. And that was Donald Trump's first deal, the West Side Highway and the Commodore, actually it was the Commodore Hotel, wouldn't have happened if they didn't pay people off. And then he just kept doing it. Yep.
Calling from a 509 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, it's Ronald Reagan. Sorry about earlier.
Ronald Reagan. What's on your mind?
Well, I've just been doing a lot of meditating and thinking about, Michael and his wanting to bring people together and find, commonalities and to see sort of the light and the spirit within everyone. And I think, just been really focused on trying to see the good and, to put the sort of petty Twitter stuff behind us. And I think just a really, really good message, to remember that all of us are here on this planet together and we should see the best in each other at all times. So, also, you met Charlie Kirk in person. Is his face really fucking weird in person too? Or is it like just a video thing?
I knew that was coming. I knew that was a premise.
Because I feel like he's the kind of person who puts the fear of God in you, like in a serial killer kind of way. Like it's hard to put your finger on it exactly, but there's like kind of a train wreck quality to his weird small face.
I have to
really find that in person.
Too.
I did not. I mean, he's a little bit. There's a little bit of wild eye quality to him. But when I met him, I mean, Brendan, you were there, right?
Yeah.
It had come after the argument.
Brendan, was it fucking weird?
He's taller than you would think. He's like
He's very
6'4",
tall.
6'5".
Yeah, he's very tall.
And he's kind of lipless, I would say, which is kind of weird.
Yes.
And his face is particularly, tight. So.
And I immediately went in on him on the argument that he had with how much he was getting paid at that time that he had with Cenk the day before at Politicon. And so I said, yeah, I looked through your...
Were you able to make eye contact, though?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And the first thing I said was like, I saw that yesterday. And then I looked into your tax filings. They're weird. And and that was right before we got onto the debate. And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, it's just weird. Like, you spend a lot of money on travel, which is weird how much money you spend on travel. Like, who's traveling around? And he's like, well, no, we got to go around quite a bit. And I said, yeah, I know that's a huge amount of travel, though. I'm trying to figure out, like, how do you do that? And then I had written on my notes on the back of it, like, I think it was 304, whatever the filing name is for the tax thing. And I just put on there, like, and I kept flashing it to him during our debate, just as a way of messing with him. I don't know if it worked, but it was fun. But I appreciate the message, Ronald Reagan. Let Twitter battles die, except for specific people. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, one other thing. Pac-Man is out there challenging you to a race to 1 million. He's really coming after you, and he's pulling away. You guys were basically tied around 908,000 YouTube subscribers. He's already at 912. Oh, yeah. And some people on Twitter were saying, well, yeah, that's because Pac-Man does more videos, but that's like saying the person who runs the race faster wins, and that makes the race unfair. I mean, I don't know. He just seems to be outworking you.
I smell bots. I smell bots. So, look, here it is right now. We'll put this video up. Look, folks, Ronald Reagan has just informed me that David Pac-Man has taken a lead in our race to get to 1 million subscribers. And I am making a personal appeal to you right now. Hit the subscribe button. It's not necessarily where I'm pointing to. I don't know where it is. Maybe it's down here or over there. But hit the subscribe button. Don't let David Pac-Man steal our valor. Thank you for the reminder.
He's stolen enough. He's stolen enough, as far as I'm concerned. But also,
right. Okay.
But also,
yes,
I think that you two need to work out some stakes. And I was thinking that the loser has to use the winner's promo code in their ad spots for like a month.
For a month?
So you would do the CBD. You would do the CBD farm ad, but then say coupon code D Pacman or whatever it is.
Our coupon code is left is best. I'm not doing that. I'll do the Suns Out, Guns Out challenge, though. I'll do the Suns Out, Guns Out where we wear a tank top. Yeah. All right. But Ronald Reagan, I'm going to say goodbye now.
All right. I'm feeling that.
Just good thing you're over the whole petty stuff, Ronald Reagan.
Should have a Twitter fight.
Here is, I don't know if you saw this, Nomi, but here's Donald Trump being asked about the passing of John Lewis by Jonathan Swan. You'll recall John Lewis did not go to Donald Trump's inauguration, which looks like a better decision in retrospect every day. But here is that exchange.
John Lewis is lying in state in the U.S. Capitol. How do you think history will remember John Lewis?
I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know. I don't know John Lewis. He chose not to come to my inauguration. He chose. I never met John Lewis. Actually, I don't believe.
Do you find him impressive?
I can't say one way or the other. I find a lot of people impressive. I find many people not impressive. But no. But I didn't go.
Do you find his story impressive?
He didn't come to my inauguration. He didn't come to my State of the Union speeches, and that's okay. That's his right. And again, nobody has done more for Black Americans than I have.
I understand.
He should have come. But I think he made a big mistake.
But taking your relationship with him out of it, do you find his story impressive, what he's done for this country?
He was a person that devoted a lot of energy and a lot of heart to civil rights, but there were many others also.
There's a petition to rename the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama as the John Lewis Bridge. Would you support that idea?
I would have no objection to it if they'd like to do it.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Would have no objection to it whatsoever.
I have no idea what you're talking about. Bridge? Why a bridge? I don't get it. Selma? Why Selma? I don't get it.
Wasn't a real estate deal.
He really is like just remember, here's the amazing thing about Donald Trump. Remember how hard they are trying to peel off just like 1 or 2% of the black vote. Mm-hmm. Just like just like any of it. And he still can't bring himself to get over the personal slight for his own political benefit.
Mm-hmm. Well, because they have to first go to him. That's anytime he gets over these little personal slights, right? It's Lindsey Graham, whoever, they have to come to him, kiss his ring, beg for forgiveness, get on their knees, beg for forgiveness. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. And they're very bad people otherwise. And I think like that is probably the most complimentary he could have been to somebody who did not kiss his ring and does not have the ability now to defend themselves. This is it's horrifying. I've done more for black people than anybody. What?
Yeah.
Unreal.
Here is, I think we spoke about this the other day. They have tried desperately on the right to do what they did with Paul Wellstone's funeral to John Lewis. What they did with Paul Wellstone's funeral is that they dined on this. I mean, folks, gosh, I wish we had the ability to go back and grab all the video from that era. And it is impossible, I think, for you, if you were not aware of this contemporaneously, if you were the age, I don't know. I mean, Nomi, you were probably a teenager at the time.
No, I was in college.
But if you were not aware of this at the time, it would be almost impossible to express this to you. For months, and it wasn't just Fox. This was the narrative that was out there in the mainstream media that Paul Wellstone's funeral had been politicized. Now, he was a politician who was an activist. He wasn't like a longtime professional politician type of guy. He was an activist. And I mean, at Michael's memorial, so much of his politics was, we talk about that because that's his life's work.
Mm-hmm.
But it was the biggest scandal that was in our media. And they've tried to do this with John Lewis, but it's this guy really, his entire life was about politics. Like, I mean, from the time that he was a student through until he was 80.
They've basically politicized it by making it sanitized. But, you know, this is always what opposition, whatever you want to say, does when someone else is winning a debate, an argument, or getting attention. And how disgusting is that, you know, they're getting attention for their life's work and people are memorializing it and they have to play these it's like a gaslighting game.
Well, but they want to make it toxic. They
Exactly.
want to make it toxic
Right.
to carry on the principles that John Lewis was talking about.
Yep.
Okay. And they are failing, though. And I think part of it is because it's a different era. I think part of it is the nature of media now. But I also think it's just a different era where the idea of like, you politicized John Lewis's funeral. Why would you not politicize John Lewis's funeral? And so they're desperate to find some hook here. And here is the evangelical right winger, Dave Daubenmire, trying desperately to do so and failing.
John Lewis's funeral, which was held in Georgia, where all the potentates and dignitaries showed up, and none of them wore a mask. None of them. See if you can find a picture of the crowd not wearing masks, Mike. I saw one this morning. I should have captured it. All of them in the church not wearing masks. But we have to, right? We have to wear masks. Did they have to quarantine themselves after they left? No, they didn't. They didn't. See, there's a set of rules for us. There's a picture. It's not about. That's not the one I was looking at.
You can't find
I saw it
picture.
yesterday. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Forget it, because there is no picture. Hey, man, look at me. I'm at a baseball field. Hey, man, I'm at a baseball field.
You were waiting for that.
I was waiting for that.
Oh,
there is
my
no picture
God.
of people not wearing a mask there.
What drives me crazy is, why are we the oppressive ones?
They're all wearing
They're all
masks.
wearing masks. They're not social distancing, but they're all wearing masks.
There is not a single person you can find not wearing a mask.
How are we the oppressors when they control government?
We're oppressing them because we are the ones who say that that COVID is real, and therefore they got to wear a mask.
Oh, because we've infiltrated Trump's administration. I think that's what it. Dr. Fauci is a Democratic infiltrator.
Of course. Let's go to the phone. Calling from a 573 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, guys, is this me?
Yes, it is. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
This is Ronald J. Bateman calling from the heartland of America, Missouri's 8th Congressional District.
All right, Ronald, what's on your mind?
I just wanted to, I'd be remiss if I didn't pay my respects to Michael Brooks. It was devastating, and I don't know what I can say that hasn't already been said. Forgive me if I'm a little nervous. I am a first-time, long-time. But I wanted to just get people out and vote in Missouri, especially in my district, to get rid of Trump sycophant extraordinaire Jason Smith. This guy is an absolute demon, to use some of the right-wing nomenclature to describe him. He is an absolute Trump sycophant. I called his office one time. Actually did a piece on this in our local paper. I'd love to send it to you for your approval, actually. But anyway, I called his office during the impeachment trial, and I knew that there was no way that he was going to be a yes vote as far as impeaching him in the House. But I was met with his overpaid and or underpaid and overworked secretary, just kind of, okay, you know, what do you want? You know, and I told her what was going on, what I had to say, and it was met with a few weeks later this really nice piece of stationery mailed to me, just giving me an unnecessary recap on what happened in the impeachment trial, and that was it. And to me, it seems like the guy is more interested in getting Trump reelected than doing anything about anything in this area. So,
well, folks should get out there, and at the very least, also, like you say, expansion of Medicaid is really big, and appreciate the call. We'll say also we've got primaries in Kansas, and if Chris Kobach wins, there's a real legitimate opportunity to pick up a Senate seat in Kansas. I have no sense of whether Kobach's going to win or not. I know that there's two opponents that could split the vote. One of them has been has not been endorsed by Trump because he's too Kobach is still too much of his guy, as it were. We also have Rashida Tlaib is fighting off a primary challenge in Detroit. There's also potential for a pickup in the House, maybe in Kansas. Should also say we had some polling. Mitch McConnell leads Amy McGrath by 17 points. What a waste!
Jeez, oh man.
I mean,
17 points.
We saw the polling prior to that, but like, there's no opportunity for her to move.
But there's a lot of opportunity to make money, so let's just put all of our resources into that race and not, other. Yeah.
I'll tell you, Lindsey Graham could lose in South Carolina. I mean, he is tied right now with Jamie Harrison, and Doug Jones is also down about 17 points.
Oof.
Yep.
Yikes.
That's tough.
We have can I give a couple shout outs to some of our matriarch candidates
Please.
Today? So Cori Bush, of course, in Missouri's 1st District. It's become a very intense race in the last few weeks. She's gotten some very nasty, there was a mailer that was sent out with a picture of her and Linda Sarsour, very similar attacks to Jamal Bowman's. They darkened her skin in the mailer.
Classy.
She is running against an African-American congressman, so it was a little surprising. They did the same thing to Jamie Harrison, and the Democratic establishment called that out. Birds, or crickets, crickets when it comes to Cori. Cori is fantastic. I've known her for years. She's just really a fighter. Arizona, Ava Putsova. She is running against a guy who used to be a Republican 2 years ago, and he's a sitting Democratic congressman, Tom O'Halloran. Really weird district. It goes from northern Arizona all the way down to southern Arizona, Tucson, very gerrymandered. But she's a former council member, and she led the fight on for 15 and paid family leave, amongst a bunch of other things. And Rebecca Parson in Washington State. She's, a very active socialist, and there's a runoff situation there. So, or not a runoff, it's a jungle primary. So 3 races, 3 extraordinary candidates, all matriarch candidates. And I don't know, just be interesting.
Get out there and vote, folks.
Yep.
Get out there and vote. I wonder, they did that with Ossoff, extended his nose. And I'm quite convinced that the reason why they did that was to get charged with doing that so that they could communicate to people that he was Jewish.
Yeah.
And that would get the biggest sort of traveling for that. And I wonder when they darken the skin of a candidate, if they are trying to raise some other issue that they feel will be talked about as they're defending themselves for changing the tint of the.
I don't know in her situation because she, it was an ad specifically talking about her alignment with Linda Sarsour. Now, remember, they were both surrogates for Bernie. Palestine really hasn't been a big issue in this election at all. Unlike the Anglo situation, which was very it was tied to foreign policy. There is a Jewish population there, and I guess her opponent is really trying to solidify it. But I mean, it was it hasn't been a conversation topic. It didn't really. I mean, it blew up on the internet a little bit, but from what I saw, Lacey Clay didn't respond at all. So I think he just wanted to see what he could get away with. Right. It's been interesting. Very, very. I hope she wins. If she does, and I think she should go for it again, because this moment was made for her. She's Black Lives Matter activist, a nurse. She had COVID. She was in the hospital twice. I mean, talk about a hard worker. She's a force of nature. She was making calls from the hospital bed with no voice.
Wow. All right. Well, here's a clip that we have. People ask often, evil or stupid with a lot of these right-wing talkers. There is no reason why you need to choose just one. Sometimes it can be both. Here is evidence of integrity, but one that is perhaps not founded on rationality. They got to believe. You got to be part of the cult. If you're gonna be part of the cult, you got to be part of the cult. This is clip number 9. Michael Knowles, Sebastian Gorka.
Coming in the whole time.
That's, they sent me home for a day and a half because they were going to broadcast from home.
Pause it for 1 second. Pause for 1 second. I should tell you, this is, now what is this, Brendan? Is this a hot mic, or do they know they're on?
I think they know they're on.
Okay, they're pretending like they're on.
This
on
is
break.
witty off mic banter that the listener get to hear.
Yeah, okay. So go back a little bit. Yeah, this is good stuff. I bet.
How you been? You're surviving.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's great. The building's empty, but we've been coming in the whole time.
That's, they sent me home for a day and a half because they were going to broadcast from home. And 36 hours, I said, I can't do this.
So you went back in?
Yeah, I went straight back into the studio.
But Drew's at home, right?
He is. He's like Save the Claven. He's like, because I will say we were smoking cigars, and he said, I got this cough, I got whatever. And then his doctor said, oh yeah, about half your lung is gone. He said, oh yikes, it's some infection, some kind of crazy.
What?
So he's like actually worried, but I think the rest of us.
Get him on hydroxy.
That's what I said. We got but you're not allowed to say that. That's illegal.
Oh, that's right.
Hydroxy. You'll get kicked off the internet if you say that.
It's only been around for 70 years, and we gave it to our troops in Vietnam. But now that's dangerous.
It's dangerous.
That's dangerous.
Say it to him privately.
My doctor put me on it immediately.
Did he really?
As a prophylactic, yeah.
Yeah.
One a week.
I think a lot of people are taking it as...
Oh, doctors!
Obviously,
doctors are taking it.
Yeah, but if you tweet about it, you'll get... I mean, I kid you not, I posted the thing of those doctors, saying how drugs is good. We had to take down the video where they wouldn't let it stay up on. I think it was on Facebook.
Our most popular video.
Yeah.
Which got trashed the first time. How many? What is it? 800,000? 820,000. 820,000 was our interview with Dan Erickson for an hour, saying,
"Really,
guys, you know your immune system only works if you're not shut up at home.
Yeah, if you use it, yeah.
If you use it."
Oh, God. The question was, why didn't Andrew Klavan go into the studio? Just take hydroxy, but they're like, oh, you can't even say that. You can say that to Andrew Klavan. He's your colleague. Tell him to take it.
I think they knew. That video doesn't come out unless they know.
Of course.
Oh, yes.
And of course.
Yeah.
And it's like, let's pretend like we're talking about hydroxy and how everybody's against us. And the idea that your immune system, I'm sorry. You know what? If you stay inside, yes, I think if you are raised as a child and you're not put out in the world in any way, you do not have time to develop an immune system. But if you are like Klavan or Knowles or Sebastian Gorka and you stay at home for a month, it's not like your immune system goes away.
Also, you are more likely to get sick at home. I'm not saying of COVID, although if you are living with other people, you're inside, number one, as we know, but also there's just a lot of other issues at home. A lot of people get sick with asthma and allergies. And just as a side note, it's fantasy science. It's total fantasy science. I don't know. I mean, are they getting paid? Are they getting paid for this?
I'm sorry. The idea that you can't say hydroxychloroquine is a good prophylactic. I mean, why doesn't Andrew Klavan use hydroxychloroquine as a prophylactic and get his ass into the studio?
Maybe he's never heard anybody suggest it around his neighborhood, like the president.
I mean, I think
maybe he doesn't pay attention to the president, Matt.
Because he's got a bad lung, he takes it seriously now, and he contradicts everything that they're putting
haircut?
out. Yeah.
Why does he get a haircut?
Oh my God!
I mean, he can go in without a mask. It doesn't matter. What, like, if a mask doesn't help you, why not go get your haircut?
Right.
Dumb.
I just think, Klavan should go back into the studio. Come on, buddy. Stop whining about your bad lung.
Your bad lung.
Yeah, whiner.
Hashtag bring back Klavan.
Yeah, bring back Klavan. Hashtag bring back Klavan.
So we're going to talk more about the post office tomorrow. David Dane will come on. We're going to talk about antitrust in the post office tomorrow. But the post office is being assaulted, as far as I can tell, for two reasons. One is because the Republicans have wanted to privatize the postal service at least for the past 15 years. I imagine the desire has been there for even prior to that. But 15 years ago, we all know the story. They forced the pre-funding of a 75-year horizon on the pension payments. Now they've installed a new postmaster general who is specifically taking administrative steps to slow the mail, to make the mail dysfunctional. And part of that is because they want to privatize a lot of the parts of the post office. The other part of it is it's a twofer. Let's see if we can make it hard to vote in the fall. Here is part of that project. Mike Pence, the vice president, coming out and trying to say the distinction between the security involved in an absentee ballot, which is mailed in through the mail or dropped off at the county commissioner voting place or wherever it is, and a mail-in ballot, which is mailed in through the mail or dropped off at the county election commission, wherever that is.
What can you say tonight to assure us that this election will not be stolen by Democrat election officials in swing states?
Well, look, the president made it very clear, whether it's the power grab in Nevada that the president or the governor of Nevada was signing that allowed not only for universal mail-in ballots, but also vote harvesting, as it's called. We're headed to the courts. Look, the right to vote, the one person, one vote right, is at the very center of our democracy. And the president's made it very clear that we're not going to stand idly by while you see, Democrat states and Democrat governors use the backdrop of the coronavirus to send millions of ballots all across their states and all across this country. Let's be clear, though, Laura, absentee balloting is perfectly acceptable. You have to apply for an absentee ballot. Signatures are checked. It's confirmed. It has a long tradition. And we want to encourage any American that is not able to go to the polling place for any reason to apply for an absentee ballot today. But this universal mail-in voting where you're going to see literally ballots showered all across the state, it is ripe for fraud, and we are headed straight to the courts to put a stop to it.
What? You have to sign a vote by mail?
Yes. There's a signature on a vote by mail. In fact, it's the exact same process.
Yes. You have to match it with the voter ID. That way, because in New York, for instance, they gave you a later option to do it in person. And so they had to choose, okay, we have to look and see, because in some cases, some people did mail it in, and then they decided to go in and vote in person. And so they had to sign off on which one they decided to use, and then they chose one.
But here is the thing, is that we're getting caught up in the sort of the red herring. It is not, they did not outline a single even theory as to how you would cheat in that and not get caught. Right. I mean, people could try and cheat, but they're going to get caught. But, this is like the idea that Bill Barr was saying, foreign powers could come in and abuse the mail-in ballot system because somehow they would know who's not voting.
Right.
and they would vote for those people in a ballot that they have. There is no theory about how this happens in any concerted way. But what they're doing, and there's Pence participating in this, they are setting the groundwork. This is what they're doing, is they're setting the predicate for the election was fraudulent.
Totally.
It did not, people are saying Joe Biden won. He did not win. That's what they're doing. Now, I don't know if they'll need it. Hopefully they do need that. But that's what they're doing. They're setting that precedent. They're not doing anything else.
Well, I mean, a couple things that stand out to me are they're basically saying that vote by mail does not help Republicans at all, which is just incredibly false. Like any electoral expert says there is no chance of quote unquote more electoral shenanigans with vote by mail. In fact, it's actually more accurate because you don't have these stupid voting machines, which the majority of them are owned by Republicans. There's like 3 Republican interests owning these voting machines.
The former secretary, the former chair of the Bush election in Ohio owned, I can't remember what the name of it was, but check out this. Now, just as Pence is doing this last night, there was a story, I think it was in the Post yesterday, that down ballot Republicans are now worried about what Trump is saying out there about the absentee thing. I mean, about the mail-in ballots, because there's a lot of elderly people who are going to be nervous about going to the polls. Like, COVID's not going to go away in November. And they're going to be nervous about going to the polls. And now they're nervous about, no, I'm not going to trust the mail-in ballot, so I'm not going to vote. And so now apparently Trump is getting the message. Let's put is this a tweet?
From an hour ago.
Yeah, this is from an hour ago. Whether you call it vote by mail or absentee voting, in Florida, the election system is safe and secure. Tried and true. Florida's voting system has been cleaned up. We defeated Democrats' attempt at change. So in Florida, I encourage all to request a ballot and vote by mail, MAGA.
Oh my God. Do you think that the elderly are reading Twitter?
Honestly, this is how, God. I mean, look, Donald Trump may win this election. I don't know I don't have a theory as to how he wins this election, but he may win this election. Yeah. But there is no way to look at what's going on now, at least in terms of what Donald Trump is involved in, and say there is a rationale behind this. This is pure panic.
Yep.
This is somebody saying, like, someone just got into his ear and said, this whole mail-in ballot thing is going to hurt you in states where there's elderly voters, like Florida.
Right.
And he's like, what? Why didn't anybody tell me this? I've got this. I've got this. Don't worry. I've got it. I know just how to phrase this. I know how to do it. Look, get me that graph. Bring the graph.
The graph.
Oh my God.
Well, and the crazy thing about this, we interviewed the president of the Postal Workers Union, and it was a fantastic interview. But this is the most popular government agency by far, like bipartisan. Everybody loves the postal service. It's just it doesn't line up to any polls. It's just so explicitly, politically motivated and financially motivated that. I mean, I think that they're going to have to do some massive organizing around it because it is so popular.
Something's going to happen with the post office, without a doubt. Without a doubt. This is going to be a disaster for this country, I think. I don't know. We'll see.
Oh, my God.
Should we play this? Ben Shapiro, what's he doing now? He's singing?
Oh, my God.
Yeah, it's kind of torture, but I mean, people might want to see it. I don't know. It's up to you, Sam. This is your show.
I don't know. Let's take a phone call first. Call him from a 478 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello, is this me?
478?
Hello?
Who's this?
Hello, is this me?
It is you.
Hi, Sam. Is this Sam Cedar from the Majority Report with Sam Cedar?
I'm sorry, this is, who am I talking to?
Sam, this is Sam. I'm from the Majority Report with Sam Cedar, except I'm from an alternate universe.
Oh, it's the alternate universe.
You can tell, of course, Sam, because we sound exactly alike.
Exactly
the same.
Sam,
I don't have a lot of time. I know this is a fun half, Sam. I have two things to tell you about my universe. Difference one, I find walking in Memphis delightful, Sam. I don't understand what is wrong with you. It's absurd for you to keep knocking this song for no reason. Do you have any idea how hard people work to write songs and perform them for your pleasure? It's absurd to me, Sam. I don't know. Can you explain this to me?
Just FYI, I had told the story, Nomi, the other day of getting high on a date and
I was on the show. I remember.
Huh?
I was on the show.
Oh, was that on the? Okay.
Yeah.
I guess it was a week ago. Jeez.
Oh, she's heard the story before. Can everyone believe this? She's heard it before.
Oh, now you're making fun of me?
Sam,
Okay.
walking in Memphis is delightful. It's a delightful song. There's nothing wrong with it at all.
I'm having
Okay,
a problem
Sam, the
with
other
my
difference
phone
about my
system. I
universe-
can't hang up
The
on
other
it.
difference.
Yeah.
The other difference of this universe, Sam, is that the aliens actually did invade, Sam. And I know there's been a lot of talk on your show that I've been catching through the subspace radio, of course, about whether or not the aliens are right wing or left wing, whether they are comrades or imperialists. And I have to break the news to you now, Sam. They're actually centrist Democrats. It's amazing. They're like Clintonians. They're exactly the same as like 1993 Clinton. It's really strange. Like, there is Social Security, but the aliens are constantly talking about raising the tax on gulags up to 93% as opposed to the 91% that you need now. And this would result in a large influx of gulags into the private sector that it's going to cause a retirement crisis. What I'm trying to say, Sam, is that our problems don't change. No matter whether aliens invade or not, we got to fight for justice for all struggles the class struggle. Yeah!
Jeff from Georgia, ladies and gentlemen. Well
my
done.
God.
Well done. I don't have a way to hang up on him, so I can't.
Jeff, hang up.
Jeff, you hang up. There it is. I saw on Twitter that he was contemplating doing that, and I give that a solid B. Give it a solid B. A little generous.
Yeah.
A little B.
I think he was just he wasn't even changing his voice. He actually was squeezing his nose. I could
He was
hear him like
squeezing his
struggling
nose.
with the breathing.
Yeah. No, I understand. All right. So just so that we can keep that same spirit up, here is Ben Shapiro apparently singing a Les Mis song. Stars. I'm not familiar with this song. Where is it? Is this current?
I don't know. Honestly, someone just posted it, and the darkness of the internet just kind of took over.
Okay,
His shirt is shiny. Do you see that? He's actually, he's in
This
character.
is back in the day when he thought he would still be in. Oh my God.
Oh my God.
There, out in the darkness, a fugitive running, fallen from God, fallen from grace. God be my witness, I never shall yield till we meet face to face.
That's my new ringtone. His voice is actually pretty good. Maybe you should just stick to that.
Yeah.
Musical
Wow.
theater.
There you go. It's a musical theater guy.
It's like a Lin-Manuel Miranda of the right wing.
I'm not sure that surprises me that much. So desperate to. This guy's so desperate.
That was 2017.
Super thirsty. Super thirsty.
Yeah,
Call
remember
from
when
the
he played the Game of Thrones theme song on his violin when the last premiere started?
I'm sorry, when I hear Ben Shapiro singing A Fugitive Running, I think, and being taken out by the cops, and I applaud it.
Where is ice?
Where is ice?
Calling from a 210 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Good afternoon, Sam. This is John from San Antonio.
John from San Antonio. How are you, sir?
Yeah, I'm good. It's going to be a huge night for progressives in primaries in Washington, Michigan, Missouri, and Arizona. Washington State has a jungle primary where candidates from all parties run, and the top two advance. In the 10th district of Washington, Democratic centrist Democrat Benny Heck is retiring, and 8 Democrats, 8 Republicans, and 3 independents are vying for the position. The top fundraiser and the favorite in the race is Beth Dolio, is endorsed by Bernie Sanders and Pramila Jayapal. Self-proclaimed socialist Joshua Collins, who is endorsed by Our Revolution, is the most radical candidate to raise over $200,000 in the cycle, and he finished 4th in fundraising. He advocates for federal rent control and divesting from the war machine. And
Hello? Is he there?
He said war machine. Out.
Oh, we got a problem with the phone system. John? Hey, we lost him.
How's the storm over there?
Matt, Brendan, do I still have you guys?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. We lost him. If he comes back in, maybe. The phone system being a little bit hinky today. Get some upgrades, and it's a little bit hinky.
How would you define hinky? What does that mean?
Just not working well.
Okay.
Just a little buggy. Let's go to the IMs for a moment. Maybe if John calls back, we'll grab him. Noah from Tampa. Why do all conservatives seem to subscribe to biological determinism and social Darwinism without understanding that's what they believe? Well, I think they want to believe that that we live in a meritocracy, and they it just so happens that their merit correlates with their biology, and they just think that's a coincidence.
Yeah, if your entire project is to naturalize hierarchies, a surface level reading of survival of the fittest is useful for that.
There you go. Barrett home too. Do you have any opinion on? Oh yeah, we already talked about that. Brock from VA. When Michael went, we did that already. Simple Social. Hey Sam, great interview. I think that during the interview you asked what justification allowed racial slavery, and I think material conditions sometimes spawn hierarchical justifications instead of the other way around. In other words, the imperialist ability to forcibly enslave African nations came before the racial justification, and the invention of racial hierarchies came as a necessary justification for the perpetuation of that practice, especially after the religious excuse was no longer useful. To me, the through line really is a coercive class distinction rather than any sort of stated justification. This happens throughout history, where those who have the ability to supplant existing power through force come up with flimsy justification afterwards, such as the rise of Sulla and Caesar, the office of Shingun in Japan, and the fracturing of Umayyad and Abbasid caliphates. Well, I mean, I think that Horne was arguing the opposite, was that the no, I maybe not. I think that they were looking, there was a material need to deal with the Spanish and the English could not afford to maintain religious sectarianism. And I mean, it's possible. I don't think the sequence is that clean. Let me just put it that way. I think these things evolve simultaneously.
Dialectically. I mean, religion evolves with these same sorts of processes over time. And I mean, I also just one note: the people who most made money off of the sort of Columbus and New Spain wasn't really the Spanish crown, but the crown's creditors in the rest of Europe. I mean, that's just a side point.
John from San Antonio, if you're out there, you can call back in. We will pick you up. I don't know what happened to him. Maybe his phone went out. Maybe that's what happened.
I think that might be the case.
Congressional baseball fan. Congratulations, America. Our president is a lost grandpa wandering around in a shopping mall while it's going out of business. Rube Davin. I honestly don't think Sanders' endorsement would help Warren with Biden's team. That's also another. Well, I don't know about that. I think the value proposition of Elizabeth Warren to the Biden folks is fundraising, and I can deliver young people and Bernie voters. Right. And so if Bernie was to endorse, that presumably would at least give them a sense of that maybe they can deliver. Now, of course, Bernie has already said, I'm going to deliver this stuff to the extent that I can anyways.
I think he does. I actually don't think this is a problem, just as it wasn't really in 2016. And it was an excuse in 2016 that Bernie people didn't show up, but that wasn't the truth. There was overall, low excitement. I mean, that's the concern I think that we all have for Biden, even though he's really killing it in the polls. It's excitement, and no one can deliver that. It's a candidate. It's who they are. No one can. I mean, Bernie went all around the country for Hillary, and at the end of the day, excitement.
Well, it wasn't just excitement, I think, in retrospect. I think there was also an intense dislike of Hillary Clinton that simply does not exist with Joe Biden.
Sure.
There are ideological differences that people have with Joe Biden, but, they pale in comparison to Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. And I think there's just simply not the level of animosity that there was towards Hillary Clinton. I think the animosity ranges from, misogyny, but also to like she was perceived as more, sort of like corrupt, and the Clintons were also. I mean, again, people discount this, but the idea that you'd have two Clintons after having two Bushes, I think that creates a sense of like, hey, wait a second.
Yeah.
We're who's being locked out of this?
The Rice VP thing makes me also see like there's a sickening need for a continuity of power among these parties that is just, I think, really unseemly to even like people who don't pay attention that much.
The thing about the Rice
Contemplate
VP
the idea of Susan Rice being vice president is insane to me.
I don't know, though. I think to some people who, passively observe politics, they see her as an institutionalist, and they see her as someone who's been competent in the past. And for them, that looks like $1 million compared to Trump.
I also think that they see her as neutral. Elizabeth Warren comes with a lot of baggage, just from running for office, baggage that Donald Trump has used against her. And I think all of the other candidates, Kamala Harris, especially because they're really going after her right now, also comes with baggage. Karen Bass, is a fairly new name for most Americans who are not, hyper political. But Susan Rice is an institutionalist. It's neutral. There's no to the majority of people. I'm not saying
Susan Rice is like a character in right-wing fan fiction. I mean,
yeah, but the far right that's super clued into all this stuff.
Yes, right. Exactly. We're talking about just mainstream folks. When it comes to somebody who they can throw firebombs at. The whole thing is they're trying to run a neutral campaign so they don't provoke Donald Trump into acting crazy and riling up his base, and God forbid, the Biden campaign not reacting properly. I think that's what this is all about, because they could have surrogates out there right now.
Wouldn't Susan Rice trigger the Benghazyites, or are they just going to come and vote for Trump anyways?
Probably vote for Trump anyways.
I don't know. Maybe it would help actually to have them like talking about Benghazi. I don't know.
I mean, they would. Even though it's not a good strategy, they probably would.
Right.
But, think about it this way. The Biden campaign, a lot of people are complaining he's not doing anything, and they're getting angry about it. And I understand that frustration. They're like, why is he not sending any? There's no surrogates out there. They don't have people on panels. There's no campaigning happening. And I think really their strategy is stay neutral. Don't add anything that can potentially bring in incoming fire by a madman.
Without a doubt. It is completely just like hide the ball the whole time. We're not going on offense.
Yep.
We're not even going to be on defense. We're just sidelined.
It's not just about him being a flawed candidate. It's about the overall strategy. Like, we're just not running a campaign.
Here is an example of how this strategy is working for the Biden campaign. Again, I would prefer a candidate who's actually offering something programmatic. The idea that you're promoting, Cobra subsidies and you're not talking about the post office. I mean, it is a huge missed opportunity, but beyond that, it's also, I think, detrimental to the country. But in terms of the narrow perspective of Joe Biden getting more votes than Donald Trump, here's an example from Fox and Friends of just how hard it is for them to figure out how they're going to attack Joe Biden. And remember now, we're 3 months out from the election, just 90 days. And, Joe Biden is definitely looking for, if they could find the most bland VP, that was, I don't know, Tim Kaine maybe. But here is Fox and Friends trying to figure out how they're going to attack Joe Biden. This is how desperate they're getting.
Looks like Joe Biden got a very important endorsement. If we had a drummer, unfortunately, he called in sick, or she. I'm not sure it would have been male or female. And it is. This just in. Please hold on to something steady. Giving the endorsement for the American Revolutionist Communist Party. They have chosen Joe Biden, ladies and gentlemen. He has got the communist vote. And here's the quote. It's really overwhelming. It might get you emotional. Here it goes. Biden is not better than Trump in any meaningful way, except that he is not Trump and is not part of a move to consolidate and enforce fascist rule, with everything that means. The struggle against this fascist regime needs to include voting against Trump by voting for Biden and being prepared to carry forward the mass mobilization if Trump loses the election but refuses to leave. So with that, you say, doesn't mean much. I'm sure Biden's not going to be head over heels about this. But I also think it's important to bring up that a lot of people are fearful that he is going to be tilting heavily socialist. And it seems the communists realize that.
Bob Avakian.
Wow. So I think that in the old days, Roger Ailes would have never allowed that quote to go on air, because when you're tuning in as a Fox viewer, maybe you hear communist for a second, but that's what you hear is that quote. Fascism, 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 fascism. So I think this might bite them in the ass a bit.
It was a smart statement by Avakian. And I also just say, the communists I know don't really follow necessarily Bob Avakian or take everything at his word. So I don't know if this is necessarily the significance that Kilmeade thought it had.
Well, I mean, let's say all the communists did follow Avakian. It still would not have the significance that and the thing is that it's like, they even know the premise of what they're saying is that, look, this communist guy supports Joe Biden. They can't even successfully make the pivot to, which means that he's going to be, communist socialism. And, they can't even make the pivot with a straight face.
Yes.
And in some ways, all they're doing is just reinforcing that idea of all he is not Trump.
Yep.
And
the audience sees communism isn't fascism. That was the most interesting thing there, is you had a communist basically say, I'm fighting the fascist, which, don't forget, all of the right wing is always conflating the two.
Right.
Reason.
Wait, I thought they were national socialists in Germany. I don't get that. I'm confused. Is Joe, why, in the old days, they would have just said, Joe Biden's a communist.
Exactly.
And he's hiding out. But instead, Kilmeade can't even bring himself. He's like, well, I imagine Biden's not terribly care about that. But some people do say that he's going to be influenced by the socialists. You know what? I hope he's right.
He would have gotten a call from the third floor back then and said, take that off TV now.
Hegseth is just so excited, though, to be honest. It's pretty funny to watch that. What else do we got? Are we leaving anything on the table here?
Not really.
Wow.
Charlie Kirk.
Still no haircut.
Forget that guy. I feel like he's just trying to establish his.
Podcast,
I think, right?
I think they did it a bit too much. Shall we say, quality control among the type of people they were recruiting to TPUSA, given some embarrassing stories that came out. And he's trying to do a few more things to get some of those folks back into the fold.
Right. We need more attention. Where's that guy who I guess now that they don't have that guy who's wasn't there like a conservative who was trolling him at these college events saying that he wasn't conservative enough?
which is hilarious. Yeah. I think that was Jacob Wall, maybe.
No, it wasn't Jacob Wall.
There's another young guy.
Yeah, I can't remember the guy's name.
I forget his name though.
All right, folks, I'm sorry. We will take one more phone call. We'll get a bunch of people who've been on the line for 2 hours. Here is a 512 area code.
Hello, Sam Sida, please hold for the president. Hey, Sam, this is Barry. How you doing?
Oh, boy. I don't know if we can have two of these today.
What's up? Look, this crazy cast of kooky characters is trapped in here because Michael Brooks, his work wasn't finished on Earth. So everybody needs to get off their butt, get on out here, read all your books.
Which president is this?
This is Barry Bush.
Which president is this?
Barry Billy Bush.
I'm sorry, it gets confusing here in Brooks' head, but anyway, all y'all, get her done.
Get her done.
Get her done.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
And now it's Jeff Foxworthy.
Oh.
Oh my God.
Maybe the worst Barack Obama impression. In history of the show.
Was that a Barack Obama impression?
I think he said,
started as one.
Yeah, I think it started.
Did you hear
All
Barack
I'll
Obama
take one
didn't
more
endorse
phone
AOC?
call. I'm warning people. My tolerance for impressions right now is very low. So here's a call from a 614 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, this is Jay from Columbus.
Oh, supposedly Jay from Columbus.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm just saying to act.
Can you get into your phone a little bit more?
How's this?
All right, that's a little bit better. All right, what's up?
Well, Sam, I appreciate your your concern for the post office because I'm a letter carrier, and I just wanted to let you in on the fact that there's other sabotage going on in the post office that I don't believe you're aware of.
Jay, can you just are you on a headset?
Is this better?
Yeah, that's a little bit better. Yeah.
I'm sorry. But there's what's called an overtime list for people like me. I got 2 kids in daycare. I need extra money. And it works out for the post office because I come in on my day off and handle my routes and nobody else has to, so they can allocate the assistants to do other work so people can get back. But now that's over. They're not allowing that now. And for the past 2 days, I've had to carry my route plus a half of another route. We had people out till 10 o'clock last night in our station trying to deliver mail. And downtown, they had people out till 11 o'clock trying to get the mail delivered. They couldn't get it delivered. And it's sabotage. The PMG is, of course, on behalf of Trump, trying to sabotage us, and they're trying to break us.
PMG, just to be clear, is the Postmaster General, who was a former, FedEx official or?
He's got a lot of stock in UPS and FedEx.
Okay. What is the morale? What is the morale with your fellow letter carriers? I understand that people are going to be, feeling demoralized. They're aware of what's going on. Like I said the other day, I've had multiple conversations with just disparate people in my lives who have brought up the post office for the first time. It's one of those things where you only talk about it when it's not working the way that it's always been working. And what is the sense of morale amongst the other letter carriers? Because hopefully there's an awareness, like we're 3 months out from an election, things could change, relatively quickly if there's a new postmaster general.
Yeah, well, that would definitely help. I mean, when I came in the office this morning, I mean, people were just dejected. They were down. You know, when I came in last night, I came in at 8:15. I was asked by the supervisor to go back out and help somebody else. I told the supervisor, OSHA regulations only require cut off 12 hours and I can go home, so bye. Wow. But people were still out and they're exhausted, and the same thing's happening today. And we actually had what amounted to an entire route that our supervisor didn't have anybody to carry today. So who knows if that's going out or what's going on.
Right.
It's a disaster.
Well, hang in there. I mean, going to, do our best to get the word out. I mean, the only thing I can tell you is my not so secret desire is just that this causes people to key in to this issue. And, come February of 2021, I would love to see a bill that says we're going to do banking at the post office, and it ends up being, some.
Well, good luck with that. Good luck with that with Credit Card Joe in office.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know.
He's not going to let them cut in to his friends in the financial industry. It's
Well,
not going to happen.
I hope springs eternal. Hang in there, man. Hang in there for a little bit longer.
That's my call.
Appreciate the work you're doing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Horrible. All right, couple IMs and then we're out of here. Henry from Nebraska. Carrie Eastman was endorsed by Obama recently, which is huge for a campaign. But should we be wary of corporate Dem endorsements? I mean, Bowman was too, wasn't he?
Yeah, but all the New York delegation was, except for AOC. Really interesting.
God.
Well,
he's like,
look,
don't upstage me.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's part of it. I think what we're seeing with Obama endorsing these people is a game of catch up.
Yeah. And there's safe seats. I mean, I might be wrong, but I think most of the races that he got involved in are safe, and they're the Democratic nominees.
Carrie Eastman's would not be.
No, you're right. But the establishment, didn't Emily's List end up coming in for her?
Maybe by now. Capinetti, I'd like to know what you guys think of Keita Hines, Tennessee 5th Dem primary, formerly in prison, currently a public defender.
Oh, I don't know this one.
Don't know.
Yeah.
Don't know.
I'll look her up.
The Social Buffalo. Trump coming out and saying capitalism is just about rent seeking. Nick Marcel with TikTok, Trump is saying he's in the middleman. He deserves to be greased. Sam, for the sub battle, I will make sure to unsubscribe from Pacman to help you in the race. You should tell your subs to do the same until you hit 1 million. No, I don't want to take away from Pacman. That's
dark arts.
That I won't do.
You're no Roger Stone here.
I'm not going to make a call for that.
You can do that
after I just read your call for it. So why would I do it for it?
You can unsubscribe to Pacman and subscribe to Literary Hangover on Twitch, though, if you want.
Definitely not Ivan. Representation without power is meaningless if the left wants real power. We need to get off Twitter, hit the streets, and endear ourselves to the people. Indeed. Trumpy Bear. Many, many people have been saying how Pacman is buying YouTube subscribers. What's your opinion of this tactic, Sam? Look, I'm not going to weigh in. Grand Left Auto. Charlie Kirk's voice sounds like it comes from a tiny face. Is there any quality that isn't irritating? Binder Dad. Trump is like the real estate agent who's after you to pay a landlord month's rent plus month's security deposit, demands additional month's rent for himself as a finder's fee. All right, 3 more. DMV Mike. Did you hear Trump pronouncing Yosemite? No. Silverball Stud. KCMO. KCK. Go vote.
I don't get that.
Andrew from D.C., who has a weirder face head to ratio, Charlie Kirk or Matt Gaetz. And the final IM of the day. Isn't the funeral for a politician inherently political? Nomi, great job. Folks, check out Nomi's show. Matt.
Nomi Key Show.
Brendan, Thank you, guys. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better.